And now it's time for Mob Talk Radio with your host, Jeff Canarsie. School's in, bitches.
And welcome to Mob Talk Radio. I'm your host, Jeff Canarsie, and we are going to do a huge Q&A today. I originally was going to do a biography on a guy, but I think I'm going to push that off till next week, mainly because there were just so many questions coming in that I couldn't get to them. So I'm going to try to get through like 70-plus questions today. We're also going to do Scumbag of the Week. There's several scumbags this week. And we are going to talk about Pete a little bit. And the reason why is I got a lot of messages. A lot of people liked last week's show and wanted to know sort of more about the guy. So I'm going to tell three stories that, they don't have so much to do with organized crime, I'll be honest with you. But it's more to the character of who people are and how they act. Because I think that there's a big sort of misunderstanding, or at least from the perspective of the streets, of how old school guys are versus new school guys, and Pete's a Sicilian guy from Italy, so they handle things a certain way, and I'm not going to be talking about anything earth-shattering or nothing like that, but just three interesting stories that were kind of fun to sort of reminisce about with somebody I know on the phone yesterday. So we are going to do that. Now, there's a couple of things I want to address before we get to the news and notes portion of this show. The first thing is I am not 100% I think the right way. I'm not 100% sure if I'm going to do a show next week. I likely will, if I do anything, it will be a short one because I am heading on vacation for a week and a half, so I'm probably going to take like 2 weeks off. But like I said, once we get to like Monday or Tuesday of next week, I'll probably know more as far as whether I'm going to do, maybe I'll just do a short Q&A for 45 minutes. I'm not sure. And it also depends on like what news breaks and et cetera and et cetera. That being said, as far as the new site goes, because I've gotten a lot of messages about that as well, we are going to launch in July. It's happening. But like I said, I'm not sure on the exact date. There have been some idiots online are like, oh, it keeps changing the date. Well, a lot of that's because, anytime you set up a new website, you get everything going, there's always little things that happen along the way that changes your out date. And a part of the reason for that is I'm coming back from vacation, right around July 1st. And I would like to take my time setting everything up. I mean, the basics of it are already there, but I want to make sure that there's certain ways. I want to test certain things to make sure the functionality works. So I'm probably leaning towards it's going to be like mid-July, like I said before, or the tail end of July. So between like the 15th and like the 30th of July, the show will launch. It is not going to be free. Everybody knows that. And as we get closer to that, I will do a more in-depth sort of show about what to expect and what we're going to do with that. But it's time to do it. Everybody else is doing it. I'm not the only one. Ratweiser and Anastasia are doing it. And other people are doing it. It's just the right way to go. And one of the unique features is that there have been people that are, and I want to be careful how I say this, but there are people who are stealing my show, essentially putting it on fourth-party platforms, and that's a problem. It's a problem because it's my work, it's my creation, and it's basically stealing. And, while I get it and all, a lot of people would argue, well, it's getting out there at least. Well, yeah, it is. But the thing is that I want to just ensure with this new site specifically, if you have any plans on joining the new site and you think you're going to use a fake name, it's just not going to happen. I'm going to get into that later on because we're going to do Scumbag of the Week, and that has something to do with that topic there. But I'm going to have the ability to not allow people to join the site. We got a whole list of people we're not, and it's just because people use fake names, fake accounts. They don't want to be themselves. And also saying that, I am going to say this. We are going to do once the show launches, anybody who's had a problem with me, anybody who's got a big fucking mouth, anybody who's a keyboard tough guy, you're going to get your opportunity to say whatever you want to me, and it's going to be a little bit of a Jerry Springer shit show. I'm not going to lie to you, because these jerk-offs are all going to line up. But, like I said, I'm going to give everybody the opportunity to say what they want to say, but I'm just telling you, don't be fucking, offended when I cut your balls from you and you got nothing left to say. Because that's what's going to happen. I'm not going to, I shouldn't give an outlet to people, and it's really not an outlet. But I'm going to give you the opportunity to say whatever the fuck you want. And then for those that are like common, decent fucking people, they're going to have an opportunity to ask me questions, talk about what they want to talk about. And so we are going to do that. Also, some people have asked me, you're going to allow these bum rats to call in and give you shit. Well, first of all, I don't think they would do that. That's number one. Number two, I won't give them a platform. But if they got the balls and they want to be called out on their shit, and they can think quick on their feet, then why not? I'll give it to them. 100%. So that is going to be something that we are going to do. But once again, this is going to be another thing where if you restrict your fucking number and you block your fucking number, you're not getting on. Because I've reached a point with a lot of this bullshit that if you're going to hide behind a keyboard, and I know who they all are. That's the funny part. It's amazing what you can find out about people with easy fucking research. And so for those that want to see somebody scream at me, you'll enjoy that portion of it. But like I said, you want to have a constructive conversation, that's fine with me. But if you want to call and act like a douche and make up lies like half of you do, and block your number, then it's not going to happen. You're not even going to be allowed on. Because when you call in, there's going to be a feature where we have a caller ID set up, and if it doesn't match a fucking name, you're not getting on. You're not going to get on. Because if the old saying is, if you're going to be man enough to like run your fucking dick licker, then be man enough to use a real fucking name and do it. That's it. That's all. That's the only requirement for that, and I don't think that's that difficult. Just be yourself. You don't like me? Fine. Own it. Own that shit. Own it with your real name. Don't own it with a fake ass profile, because that's what you do. So that is going to be one of the features. We're also going to do live shows where you will be able to see the studio stuff. But I don't think that's going to happen right away. I'll be honest with you. That's going to be something that will be instituted probably a month or two after we start the pay site, because I have guests that are coming on the show. I am talking with sort of somebody who was a big-time gangster in London, over in Europe, to come on the show. There's a couple of people that I'm lining up. But the problem is with that is that, a lot of what's popular now is people who talk to the informants and the rats. I'm not going to do it. This particular person isn't a rat at all. Did a lot of fucking time, and that's the whole point. I want to have people on there that live the life, that are out of the life, and that are going to talk about certain aspects of it. And so that's what we're going to try to do. But it's not an easy task because everybody wants something a little different. Everybody's got a book to peddle. Everybody's got a film they want to talk about. And I have one rule, and it's always been this. I'm not going to put an author on my show without reading the fucking book. I mean, I've seen a lot of people who have these authors on, and they haven't even read the book. They haven't even done the basics. So if you're an author and you want to be on the show, and I get a lot of messages from authors, send me a PDF for your book or a synopsis, and we're good. And I'll check it out, I'll read it, and then we'll have you on. Because I don't want to have a guy on who's worked his ass off writing a book, and I don't know anything about what he's fucking talking about. That's sort of pointless. So that's what we're going to move towards in July. So like I said, we're going to do a big Q&A today. We're going to talk Scumbags of the Week. And we're going to talk about Pete a little bit, and then we're just going to sort of figure out at the end of the week whether or not we are going to be back next week. It's going to depend, honestly, on how tired I am, because I got a lot of stuff going on this week. Also, there is a new radio show coming out. It's not mine. It's a friend of mine's named Justin. It's called Lights Out Radio. It's going to be like a paranormal show. I've seen some of the early cuts of his intros and stuff like that. It looks really fucking good. And if you're into the ghost shit, if you're into the paranormal shit, you're into the weirdo stories, this is going to be the podcast for you to listen to. He's a good dude. He's a smart guy. He's very creative. I'm very impressed with his work thus far. He hasn't launched yet. I don't know what his launch date is going to be, but I think you're really going to like it. If you like spooky shit, that's going to be all for you. Turn the lights down, get a bowl of popcorn, just do your fucking thing. Also, the True Crime Page podcast with Scott Williams Collier is another good one. If you're into serial killers, mass murderers, and that kind of good stuff, Scott's working on a book about a serial killer, and he's also working his ass off on bringing you really one of the better serial killer podcasts that are out there. But like anything else, a lot of people work for a living, and there's not a ton of time to do stuff. So Scott's bringing them along as quick as he can, but it's where he began versus where he's ended up is nothing short of excellent. So I look forward to more of those podcasts. So definitely I will keep you in tune with that. Also, one last thing. There is going to be another radio show coming out with me. It is not going to be Mafia related. It's not going to be organized crime related. I can't give you a date on that either. It's a free show, but it's going to be something that I think a lot of people are going to like. It's going to be like a morning show with myself. I have a co-host that is going to be flying into New York a couple times a week to do it. And it's going to be a bit of everything. Not organized crime, not politics, just more comedic type of stuff and a bunch of other shit. And I'm sure that the fucking haters are trying to type on their fingers now, ooh, where do we find this so we can dog them about this, that, and the third. I don't know what the show's format's completely going to be. We're still kind of working on it, and I think we're going to do a couple of test shows to see how it does. But I think just based on what we've already sort of discussed, it's going to be pretty big. I think it's going to be really good. I mean, I've talked to a lot of people that listen to my show and said, what do you think about this, that, and the third? And it all seems to be like, oh, yeah, we've listened to that. So it's going to be a little bit different than what we do here. I'm still going to be the same asshole. That's not going to change. It's just some of the stuff we talk about is going to be a little different. And so it's just a bridge gap. That's all it is, to something a little different. I love doing the mob genre stuff, and I'll continue to do it. I just want to branch out and do something a little bit different with some creative stuff, and so that's the way we're going to go. So all that being said, that is pretty much it for that section of news. But specifically, I wanted to talk about this pandemic in Italy. And the reason why is because we know that the pandemic in Italy, the Italian government pretty much dropped the ball in a million different ways. We also know that simple things, like unemployment checks, insurance, medications were almost impossible to get, and they still are in many cases. And one of the things that the Mafia has done in Italy during the pandemic was provide food, money, supplements, medication, and they did this for hundreds of fucking people during the pandemic. And it's something that the Italian government was really scared about before this all happened. They figured this would happen, and that's what it did. That's what did happen. But there was little to nothing they could do about it. A lot of the neighborhoods didn't have public assistance, and the government just wasn't willing to step in to help. I mean, listen, I'm not trying to knock the Italian government, but at the same time, there are things that they could have done that they didn't, and it's just the reality of a pandemic. But not only has the Mafia regained a foothold on properties, and in some places they've even reclaimed businesses that were once taken by the government in criminal conspiracies, and as a result of trials. They don't have RICO in Italy, obviously, but this is nothing new to the mob. For instance, in 1929, during the Depression, American mobsters did what they had to do to survive and keep their rackets and sort of keep their people in their neighborhoods safe. And how did they do that? Well, Luciano took a lighter envelope every month. He stopped collecting protection money from the garment district in Manhattan, and it kept them in business. He also divvied out small loans to businesses that were in need with low tax, and in some cases, he would take a 1% ownership stake or a 2% ownership stake in these businesses. Al Capone was no different. He opened up a soup kitchen to feed the masses who didn't have anything to eat. He would often have bread delivered, soup delivered, and he fed 2,200 people a day for a long fucking time. The Yakuza opened up soup kitchens in Japan after the 95, 2011, and 2016 earthquakes. And when the Fukushima power plant exploded, the Yakuza sent in workers to help clean up. So organized crime has always been involved in where they can make a dollar, they can make a dollar. I'm not trying to make them saints here, but I'm just telling you that if they can make a dollar and help, that's what they're going to do. In March, the Ingawa Kai, which is the third largest branch of the Yakuza, sent 30,000 surgical masks around China and Japan. Italy was no different, as Italian factions of organized crime, like I said earlier, that they delivered food, medicine, and it was designed for people that the government wouldn't help. In Calabria, bosses let up on loan sharking taxes and fees, and in many cases extended the terms. Because listen, if a guy can't pay, a guy can't pay. I mean, it's a fucking pandemic. So, but one of the things that we're seeing now is the mob getting involved in the Italian healthcare system. They've been able to entrench themselves by getting lucrative contracts and basically using those contracts to launder money. In July of 2010, a guy by the name of Carlo Antonio Giracco, who is the health director of the Azienda Sanitaria locale in Pavia, the local healthcare system in Pavia, south of Rome, was one of the largest in Europe, and he was arrested for collaborating in association with the Mafia. So we're seeing these big corporate health people getting involved with the mob for profit. In April of 2014, investigators found links between the director general of the hospital in Caserta, outside of Naples, and then in May of 2015, $10 million was seized from the same hospital, funds which were tied to Mafia-endowed contracts. And so it just shows that the mob is making inroads into the healthcare system. Even in 2016, prosecutors shut a pharmacy down in Milan because they believed that it had been bought with drug money by mob guys for the sole purpose of narcotics distribution and money laundering. So it just goes to show that whereas there's a dollar to be made, these guys aren't going to slow down. The slow distribution of funds to Italian citizens really caused the citizens to go out and get outside help. They had no choice. And while the Italian authorities claimed, the mob is only out for his own pockets, the citizens of Italy really aren't seeing it that way. Many of them only survived because the Mafia stepped in and helped. So it's a matter of, they're taking care of their people for a lot of different reasons. One, they do care, but two, there's profit to be made. When you go into a poor community and you help them out, they're going to be less apt to tell on you. And that's probably the motivation here. I'm not going to lie to you. But like I said, people didn't have help. They didn't have a hand from the government and really still haven't. And people who desperately needed to survive, they did what they had to do. So this pandemic, if nothing else, has brought the mob back in power in Italy. That we haven't seen in a long time. And so I constantly get questions from people saying, how has the mob profited during the pandemic? And well, there you go. And I think that once, obviously baseball at this point doesn't look like it's going to happen because they're fighting with the unions. But once sports comes back, the bookmaking will start. The NFL will start a regular season, hopefully, and so money will start rolling in again. But until that happens, it's going to be pinching the quarter till the eagle screams. So, all that being said, that's going to be the news and notes. We are going to take a short break, and when we come back, we are going to get into the massive Q&A. Stay tuned on Mob Talk Radio. I know at times we like to have a lot of fun on this show, but it's time to get serious about one thing. I know that the coronavirus pandemic has hurt a lot of my listeners in their businesses. Restaurants have been ordered to close, gyms have been ordered to close, cigar lounges have been ordered to close, and even bars have been ordered to close. These are small businesses that don't always have the cash reserves to continue making their rent or mortgage payments. They can't even pay their vendors. My good friend Mike Kaysen of Kaysen & Kaysen is an experienced bankruptcy lawyer that is there to help you right now. Kaysen & Kaysen represents individuals and small businesses in complex bankruptcy proceedings in New York, New Jersey, Philadelphia, and Miami. Give Mike a call at 646-397-6226. And if you mention Mob Talk Radio, he's going to give you a free consultation. Once again, it's Mike Kaysen of Kaysen & Kaysen, 646-397-6226. On a given week, I'm out of town a lot. Whether it's Philadelphia, it's New Jersey, Connecticut, Rhode Island, wherever the case may be, I'm always looking for a place where I can sit down and have a great dinner. Ambiance is key, price is obviously key, but the most important thing is the food good? And there's a place I want to tell you about today. It's called Saltwater at Margate. If you are going down to the shore, because I know a lot of people in Philadelphia go to the shore, especially Margate, you're missing out on a great restaurant if you haven't been there. The name is Saltwater Margate. It's at 9401 Ventnor Avenue, Margate City, New Jersey. The phone number there is 609-289-8078. You can also visit them online at saltwatermargate.com. This place is unbelievable. Not only is the food absolutely superb, the price is great too. They're renowned for their pizza and their gnocchi. They have all kinds of different things from mussels to roast pork and Italian fare. So do yourself a favor, do me a favor, go and visit Saltwater Margate. You will not be disappointed. It is a place that I think at some point, if not already, there's going to be lines out the door and around the block. So if you're down on the shore, stop in, go to Saltwater Margate. At least check them out online at saltwatermargate.com.
Today's Mob Talk Radio episode is brought to you by the following sponsors. Scarf Inc. Pest Control Services. If you've got a pest, we'll whack them out.
And welcome back to Mob Talk Radio. Okay, per the usual. I get a lot of questions submitted every week. I think there was like 250 this week. I can't always get to them. I have also said repeatedly that certain questions I'm not going to answer no more. And that's just the way it's going to be. There's a lot of repetitive questions, and I get it. Not everybody listens to every show. But just certain things I'm just not going to talk about anymore because it's just passé and it's time to move on from it. So if I just completely ignore your question, that's probably the reason why. A lot of people still are confused about how to submit questions. Okay, what you need to do is go to Facebook and go over to the Mob Talk Radio page on Facebook, and you can send me a message there. Or usually I post Q&A and go, and people ask questions. Now, what I typically do sometimes is I'll post two. I'll post one, and I get about 80 to 100 questions, and then I'll post another, 10 more. And I never get 10 more. I always get like 80 more. That's just kind of the way it works. So if I get to your question today, that's great. If I don't, just shoot me a reminder. Say, hey, I asked you this. Could you please answer that? Certain questions are more in-depth than others, and I cannot devote 10 minutes to a question. But if it calls for me going in depth, then that's what I'll do. So if I don't get to your question, that's the reason why. I'm going to try to blow through as many as I can today. So let's just start. Question number 1 is, in all your travels, have you ever had a weird conversation with mobsters, or what was the weirdest conversation you've ever had? I don't think that I've really had weird conversations. Some disturbing ones. I think that goes without saying. And I can give you sort of a reference point for this. I was in New York City probably a year ago with 5 or 6 guys. Most of them are involved in the life or whatever. It was a nice dinner, very expensive stuff. Of course, I'm looking at the fucking menu, and these pricks are ordering every fucking appetizer there is, and I'm like looking at the price going, oh, fuck, this is going to cost like $1,000. So we're sitting there basically eating dinner, and it's just normal conversation. How's your wife? How's your kids? How's your family? How's the church? Politics? It's just different stuff. But it always sort of goes down a road that I'm not comfortable with. And it's not that I'm not comfortable with the subject matter. It's just the descriptions of the subject matter. And the reference point would be, at some point in this dinner, the history of the Mafia came up. And, guys are talking about the old days and this, that, and the third. Now, keep in mind, most of the people that are here at this dinner range between 40 to like mid-50s. And so everybody's within a 10-year gap of each other. So, everybody knows what everybody's talking about. And I'm sitting there eating. I can't remember what the fuck I was eating. I think it was pasta or something, or maybe veal. I don't know what it was. But I'm eating. And in the middle of this diatribe that's going back between Joe Bonanno and this hit, that hit, this guy, and I'm not going to say his name, says, you remember when they cut that guy's fucking prick off and put it in his fucking mouth? I'm trying to fucking eat. And I got sausage on my plate. I'm not trying to fucking imagine some guy's prick it and cut off and rammed in his fucking mouth or his ass, and I'm trying to eat this garbage. I just sat there like, really? This is the conversation we're going to have right now? I got Alfredo. What do you think I'm supposed to think that fucking is now? But it's just the random absurdity of shit. Because, listen, and the weird thing is, him even saying that, first of all, I got Alfredo sauce and a sausage. You could put 2 and 2 together there, right? All right, he's talking about some guy cutting another guy's prick off and putting it in his mouth. Okay, that's bad enough. I'm trying to fucking eat. But you got the fucking waiter who walks up and he's hearing this shit. The look on his face was fucking epic. What the fuck are these guys talking about? And there was a lady sitting at the table. She's just looking like, what the fuck did I just sit down at? But yeah, that's sometimes those sometimes some things happen. All right, can you tell us about Dominic Napolitano? What we know about the Joe Pistone Association. Beyond that, who was he? What kind of earner was he? Is it true he had pigeons? Yes, he absolutely had pigeons. And before he died, he knew he was going to get whacked, and he gave up his pigeons before, just make sure you take care of the pigeons. So I think the best way to answer Sonny Black, if you don't know who we're talking about. Obviously, if you've seen Donnie Brasco, the film, you know who Sonny Black was. The film got it not totally wrong, but it was a little too Hollywood and a little too much of Joe Pistone's fucking narrative to suit my needs. But it is what it is. Lefty Ruggiero was definitely not a guy cracking a fucking parking meter with a fucking hammer. That's all bullshit. And I know Lefty Ruggiero's granddaughter was really fucking pissed about the way they portrayed him, and she actually went on set to talk to Al Pacino, and he sort of sat down with her and ironed some things out. But they really tried to make Lefty Ruggiero look like a fucking borderline retard, and I just don't think that's a fair assertion, because Lefty Ruggiero was a no-joke motherfucker, let me tell you. But I think the first thing is, look, Sonny Black was called Sonny Black because actually he was born with blonde hair, and he didn't like it, so he would dye it black, and that's where he gets the nickname. And he actually controlled Williamsburg, Brooklyn, and would eventually control parts of Florida after negotiating control of the territory through Santo Trafficante Jr. Basically, they sat down. He says, I want to run this certain area. I'll kick up this much to you. Okay, go ahead. You can run that, which led to King's Court and all that kind of good stuff. But he would basically completely take over bookmaking outside of Orlando. Then in 1973, he becomes a capo, replacing Carmine Galante. Obviously, we know what happened to him. And his mentor, Mike Sabella, was demoted in favor of Sonny Black. He would get close to Rusty Rastelli and Joey Massino. But the problem was when Rastelli took over, it really created a splinter within the Bonanno crime family. One half went with Rastelli, and the other half went with Sonny Red and Delicato. And Sonny Black was on the Rastelli and Massino side of things, and were responsible for killing Dominic Trinchera, Alphonse and Delicato, and Philip Giacone. He was involved in everything from extortion, murder, drugs, loan shark, and hijack and bookmaking, and he led one of the most profitable crews the Bonannos have ever seen in their lifetime. Just a couple names that were in that crew: Nicky Santora, Lefty Ruggiero, Louis Anastasio, John Booby Cersani, Robert and Franklino, Joe Grimaldi, Nick Accardi, and Michael Mancuso, Anthony Urso. Those were just a couple of the names that were in that crew, and that was a highly profitable, highly, highly dangerous fucking crew. And they were insanely strong. However, it would be Lefty Ruggiero who would introduce Joe Pistone to Donnie Brasco, to Sonny Black. And, he's the one that wanted to make Donnie Brasco. Sonny Black did. They were very close. And Donnie Brasco was going to be made into the Bonanno crime family, but the initiation process for him would have been to kill Bruno and Delicato. But as we know, that didn't happen. And it was Joey Massino who was completely fucking infuriated with what Sonny Black did. And that's what leads to Sonny Black's death. He introduced Joe Pistone. He's got to go. It's been said that he arrived at a sit-down. He was shoved down a flight of stairs where Franklino and Filicomo shot him and killed him. Allegedly, Sonny Black survived the first shot to the fucking head and then screamed at them, shoot again, and put him out of his misery. And that's exactly what they did. All right. What would be the oldest family in the United States outside of New York? Some say it was the New Jersey family. What's your opinion on what the oldest crime family outside of New York is? Probably the oldest is going to be the New Orleans crime family. Obviously prior to Carlos Marcello. And really, we know that because in 1890, there was an incident in Louisiana which was a mob hit on a police superintendent. He was whacked execution style by a band of Sicilian mobsters. And what happened after that really is some historical shit. Hundreds of Sicilians were arrested for the crime, 19 got indicted for murder, and ultimately what would end up happening is they would get acquitted, and the citizens of New Orleans would go fucking nuts. And they would form a lynch mob, and they would string up 11 of the 19 and kill them. 2 got hung, 9 got shot, and 8 escaped. And it's long been considered a huge setup by the law enforcement there. But you can read about that more online, obviously. But that's really the first ever known evidence that suggests that the Mafia had a family in New Orleans, and I think it was really not until like 1910 when the 5 Points gang started that we really have an official record. All right, is it true that Michael Jackson's manager, Frank DeLeo, was connected? Now, for anybody that doesn't know who Frank DeLeo is, he played Tony Cicero in Goodfellas. So if you are curious as to who that is, go back, watch Goodfellas. If you remember Tony Cicero, that is who Frank DeLeo is. And a lot of people didn't know that Frank DeLeo was a major record producer. He was huge in the music business, and he absolutely had close ties with the Mafia, and specifically Joe Naples, who was the boss of the Genovese crew in Ohio. And Michael Jackson had accused Frank DeLeo in 1989 of pretty much embezzlement, taking his money. And I don't know how that all worked out, and I didn't want to look into all of that. But basically, Michael Jackson does get back involved in business in 2009 with Frank DeLeo. And DeLeo was involved in Michael Jackson's last This Is It tour. And Frank was widely responsible for making epic records the juggernaut it became. He took it from a $65 million company to over $250 million. So when it came to the music business, Frank DeLeo really knew what he was doing. And I think when you look at the music business, I think there's an episode of The Sopranos where they're talking about black artists who didn't get the money that they were owed for writing credits, because in the old days the way the mob did it was they would put their name on writing credits and they would reap all the rewards of it. It's always kind of been that run that way. I think it still is to a large extent, but under DeLeo, they were able to grab REO Speedwagon, Gloria Estefan, Ozzy Osbourne, Luther Vandross, Meatloaf, Cyndi Lauper, Culture Club, and then they signed Michael Jackson. So DeLeo was really responsible for making Epic the way, or the juggernaut that it sort of became. And he was a definitely mob-connected guy. Most record company guys coming up in the 60s, they had to be, because the mob is the one who controlled everything. And Michael Jackson had a history of being involved with the Mafia as far as bankrolling tours and stuff like that. No, I'm not going to play the conspiracy game that the mob whacked Michael Jackson. I'm not going to do that. A lot of other people do it, but I'm not going to do it. But definitely. All right. Nicky Scarfo shook down everybody down in Philadelphia plus Atlantic City, so meaning he was earning a lot of money, and I've never heard stories about how rich he was. Well, there's a simple reason for that. Ask Leonetti, who stole all his fucking money. You know, one of the things that Nick did is got his hands into the unions. When you can get your hands into the unions and you can form a subcontract company called Scarf Inc., which dealt with construction on the Atlantic City coastline, that's big money. So if we look at that objectively, it's a great question, because if he's involved in all that and he's getting all these kickbacks, where the fuck did the money go? And I think, you know, as we've talked about in previous weeks, Leonetti stole a lot of money from Nicky Scarfo. That's absolutely true, certifiably true. That was a part of his agreement, is that he could take money with him. And a lot of times when these guys sign agreements, they gotta give up their rights to a certain amount of money. They gotta pay fines, and that's another thing about these informants. And I'm really not going to get on a fucking tangent with this or a rabbit trail with this, but you know, they get 25% of everything that's collected by the federal government. Houses, boats, they get 25% cut of that. They get a 6-figure deal. It's bullshit. It's bullshit. It's always been bullshit. But usually they don't let them take a ton of money with them. But in the case of some of these guys, they're definitely doing that. All right. If Gambino was alive when Angelo Bruno was killed, would Gambino be fuming and demand the murder of Bruno's killers? Or, since Gambino essentially had complete control of the commission, would he want the Gambinos to take over all of the rackets in Philadelphia, which would end the Philadelphia crime family, making Philadelphia basically another territory for the Gambinos? I'll be honest with you. I don't think that hit really ever goes down if Gambino is still alive. But if it did, I don't think Carlo Gambino would have been very happy about it. And I think he would have reacted the same exact way that Vinny the Chin did. He would have killed him. But Gambino wouldn't have pushed for a Gambino takeover in Philadelphia. That would have created war. That would have created problems, and I don't think that would have been Gambino's narrative. I think the likelihood is they probably would have put somebody in that they could probably push around a little bit. I think that makes a little bit of sense. And I think Carlo Gambino was just sort of a listener versus somebody who's going to grab a gun immediately. But then again, we have to remember that Gambino really did the same shit that these guys did down in Philadelphia. I mean, you can't, and I say this all the time, you can't, I don't want to bring it up and go down this rabbit trail with it, but you cannot blame Gotti for killing Castellano when Luciano did the same shit to Joe Masseria. You can't do it. Or Salvatore Maranzano. You can't do it. They've been killing bosses and whacking bosses since the beginning of fucking time. So if you're going to hold one accountable, you just got to hold them all accountable for it. You can't say, oh, what he did was wrong. He ruined the mob by killing Castellano. Well, Luciano did the same thing. But the parallel or the difference in that is that what Luciano, what Genovese, and what Gambino did after the fact, when they came in after a hostile takeover, so to speak, they really honed their craft. It built their families to be very strong. That's probably the major difference between, say, Gotti and some of these other guys that did this stuff is when these other guys took over, it was a well-oiled machine. And I think we know, as history sort of shows us, that the Gambinos ran like a well-oiled machine for 4.5, 5 years. And then it would then it was forget about it. Then there were all kinds of problems. So, like I said, you can't hold one accountable for what the other does, but there are some subtle differences. But I don't think Carlo Gambino was the type who was going to meddle in a lot of family problems somewhere else. I just don't think he saw that as profitable for him. And honestly, I don't think that if Gambino had been alive, I don't think anybody pops fucking Angelo Bruno. I just don't think they do it. Because I think the amount of the shitstorm that would happen to them as a result probably would have been worse than what Vinny the Chin did. But I didn't know Carlo Gambino, and I'm not sure. All right, why were Angelo Bruno and Carlo Gambino so strongly connected? Did they come from the same part of Italy, or were they just business partners? For the most part, they were business partners and friends. Guys went back decades, and that's really the crux of it. All right, Jeff, did you ever go to the Mummers Parade in Philadelphia? When I was young, my uncles used to tell me that the mob was in the parade. Now I see all kinds of pictures online with mummers. I see pictures of alleged made guys with mummer suits on all these mob pages on Facebook. Listen, I've seen the same photos, and listen, alleged is alleged, and what? A guy can't enjoy a fucking parade? I mean, I get your question. I understand where you're coming from. Listen, mob guys do everything. They go to ball games. They go to football games. They watch TV. They're the same as everybody else. I mean, I think people have a warped sense of who these people. They're still humans at the end of the fucking day. They still tie their fucking shoes. I mean, some of them probably have Velcro shoes. Not in Philly, but just in general. I'm just making a crack. But, listen, if they enjoy parades, let them enjoy parades. What the fuck is wrong with that? Because, listen, they protected their neighborhood during this pandemic. I'll tell you that much. If more American, and I'm not getting political with it, I don't give a shit about all this stuff, and I don't have a stance either way. But when I see Philadelphia people protecting the Columbus statue, when I see them protecting the neighborhoods with bats, I got no problem with that. That's some old school shit. That's why I love Philly. If more cities and states did that shit, it curbed this nonsense that's going on, you'd see shit really, really coming to its own very quick. Nothing cracked me up more than seeing them all with baseball bats walking through the neighborhood. You come in the neighborhood, you're coming in one way, you're leaving another. It's as simple as that. You should protect your neighborhood, and God bless them. God bless them. All right. The rapper Drake has mentioned the mob in his songs. With him being from Toronto and having different business ventures, does he really have ties? I doubt it. Listen, I don't. Drake, I know who Drake is. Obviously, I don't listen to his fucking music. I can tell you that much. But listen, a guy from Chicago that's a rapper knows about the Mafia, right? But just because you rap about him doesn't mean you fucking know him. I seriously doubt he has Mafia ties to them. It's probably just... It's probably, just I gotta bust up on this. I'm sure this got picked up on the radio. My phone is fucking demonic. I didn't touch a button and the fucking Siri started chirping about Mafia. It's fucking weird. Sorry about that. Just fucking these phones are fucking weird. The Mafia. What the fuck? I didn't even touch a button. The phone was across the room. All right. But no, I don't think Drake has any Mafia ties. I don't think he hangs out with gangsters. He just does his thing. All right. How do you think Sammy and Gotti conversation went after they heard the FBI wiretaps? Okay, this is the last time I'm going to answer any question revolving these two. To my knowledge, there wasn't a discussion at all. I know that Sammy the Bull has his version of events saying that Gotti apologized. Oh, I had a big mouth. I'm sorry. Those are Sammy's events. Or those are Sammy's words about that event. Do I believe it? No. Do I give a shit? No. I mean, it is what it is. You know, if a guy gets caught on a wiretap bad-mouthing people, it's going to create friction and problems. You know, and it is what it is. I wasn't there. I don't know the conversation they had. One of them is dead. The other's alive. So if you can't have a situation where there's a rebuttal, how can you believe what somebody says? And then that's just the truth. All right. I know that both of the guys I'm about to mention are both rats, but my question is, out of Sammy the Bull and Gas Pipe, which rat do you think was being honest with what they said? Oh, and he goes on to say, I have heard some of what Gas Pipe has said contradicted what Sammy the Bull has said. Do you think there was any chance that the government dismissed what Gas Pipe said as lies so that the Gotti conviction would stand? Absolutely 100%. One of the things I can tell you with Gas Pipe is that Gas Pipe was a big drug dealer, right? And everybody knows that there were problems between the Gotti faction and Gas Pipe because Angelo Ruggiero tried to move on Gas Pipe by using Jimmy Heidel, and in turn, Gas Pipe blew up Frankie DeChico and fucking tortured and killed Jimmy Heidel. All that being said, one of the things that Gas Pipe had a problem with was he signed a cooperation agreement. They were going to forgive him of his crimes. He would get out. He would have to testify, yada, yada, yada. That's just how it went down. The problem is when Gas Pipe started talking, he was refuting some of the things that Gravano had said, because one of the sticking points was Sammy Gravano was like, I was never a drug dealer, which was a huge fucking lie. You would only have to go 4 or 5 years past the Gotti bullshit to see Sammy Gravano get locked up for drug dealing. Okay, so Gravano was a big drug dealer. Don't get it twisted. The problem is that Gravano had fucking denied that. And Gas Pipe knew better because he was in the drug business with Gravano. And so when Gas Pipe starts speaking out saying, no, you got it wrong, your star witness was a huge drug dealer. And that creates a fucking problem. It creates a problem for multiple reasons, but it creates a problem because it proves that Gravano was lying not only to the feds, which I think they knew about, but he's lying to the fucking jury, which directly affects the Gotti trial. And so what the FBI does in turn is they make these claims that Gas Pipe's shaking people down in prison, he's getting violent, so they tear up his cooperation agreement. They tore up his cooperation agreement for no other reason than because he was talking subversive about their star witness. If Casso doesn't do that, he probably gets out of prison and goes and lives in Pocatello, fucking Idaho, banging cows for the rest of his life. But I think absolutely Casso was telling the truth. And I think that, at least as far as Gravano goes, and that was a big problem for the feds, a huge problem for the feds. And that's why they tore up his cooperation agreement and buried him in the fucking hole. I don't know if he's in ADX still or not. I think he's been moved, but that's exactly what happened to Gas Pipe. He told the truth about Gravano. The feds didn't want to hear it, and so they trumped up bullshit on him to keep him locked up. I'm not defending what the guy did. I'm just telling you what is known publicly. All right. What happened if some of the other Mafia families tried to set up something in Vegas? Would Tony Spilatro in Chicago have to okay it? First of all, no. Tony Spilatro didn't have that kind of power. That's number one. And it probably would have gone to the Savellas and Chicago, Savellas being in Kansas City, because Kansas City and Chicago and Milwaukee pretty much control Vegas on their own. And it wasn't just specifically Chicago. Chicago had the final word, but Kansas City and Milwaukee were also involved in it. So, if something needed to be done, it would have had to go through channels, obviously. But I think people think that Tony Spilatro had some sort of Godfather reign, and he really didn't. His job specifically was there. He was there to protect Frank Lefty Rosenthal. And then what he does is he sort of sets up shop, and he really creates a lot of problems in Vegas. And I think Tony Spilotro thought he was the boss of Vegas, and he wasn't. So I think there's a lot of myths and things that get distorted. But no, nothing would have to go through Tony Spilotro. He wasn't that powerful. He was a captain. I don't think there's any way that we can say he wasn't, but he didn't have that type of fucking power. All right, now this question, here's the thing about this question, right? So I do not want to give any of these fucking creatures, because that's what they are, any sort of fucking attention. So I don't want to get totally specific just because all right. So who is this guy they called Hootie? He is a Gambino rat from Queens. He was on, and I'm not going to name the show, he was on this blankety blank show, and they had a guy on called Anthony Russo, also known as Hootie. Do you know anything about this guy? What makes made guys a rat? Is it they're afraid of getting clipped, doing hard time? First of all, let me answer it this way. Anthony Russo's a bitch. And let me tell you why he's a bitch. Because this is the guy that got 35 months in prison for a conspiracy to commit murder. And he cried on the fucking stand to the judge like a coward. Please, I'm scared. And of course, he gets 35 months for prison, time served. He gets out because he rats. So he's a coward. He's a bitch. But as far as, listen, these shows that, and it's not specific because there's a ton of them out now. You have, is it entertaining? I'm sure on some level for people it is. For people like me, it's like a thorn in my side that never fucking stops. And the reason why is because they're lying. They're lying to you. And if you just took 10 minutes, to just research anything that is said, you're going to find that they're not telling the truth. And if you want to be lied to, hey, what the fuck? I don't give a fuck. Do what you want to do. But I think that the minute that people begin to take informants seriously, then it's unfortunately, and I'm not knocking anybody that enjoys it, because you're entitled to watch and enjoy whatever you want, okay? But my thing is that they sell big fish stories. You know what I mean? They want you to think that they had the fucking 20,000 square foot house on a hill. They had a crew underneath of them. None of these guys had a fucking crew. None of them. They have inflated who they are. They have inflated their past, and they're entitled to do that. The problem is they know that the majority, not the majority, but probably a very high percentage of people are too lazy to look up information for themselves. They are enamored with what a gangster is and what a gangster should be or what ought to be, and they get fooled very quickly. And they'll bring on anybody. They'll dig up anybody they can to back up their bullshit. But the problem is, why is it that, and I'm going to pose you a very interesting question, okay? And by all means, I am not sticking up for Gravano, but I'm going to tell you this. How many names of these other groups that are out there that are doing their shows, how many times has Sammy Gravano mentioned their fucking names, saying they claim they knew him? He ain't never mentioned their name because the truth is they didn't know him. He didn't know them, and he's not going to back up somebody that's bullshitting like that. I mean, granted, he's a rat and all that kind of shit, but that's the thing. Ask yourself that question. These guys all bring each other on their shows. There's like 10 or 12 different shows that are going on right now with these fucking crumbs. But the fact is, how come a guy like Sammy Gravano, who of all that whole rat squad was actually a real fucking gangster, did gangster shit, is well known for being a gangster, how many of those names of these other shows does Sammy Gravano mention? 0. You need to pay attention to that. But as far as why guys rat, because they're soft, they're weak, and I don't understand it. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. When you join the army, you know that there is probably a chance you could go to war, and you're going to have to kill people, right? That's just so. I also use the reference point of you get in a car with 3 friends. They say they're going to rob a bank. You're in the car. You are volunteering, knowing that the chances of you going to prison are high. And what happens is these guys get in the fucking car. They rob the bank. Then they all get caught, and they say, "Oh, it wasn't my idea. I'm not going to jail for their idea." They have no problem taking the money. They have no problem taking the fucking ego and sort of the press that comes along with that, because it makes them feel good. But at the end of the day, they turn and they rat because they can't do time. Sorry about that. I had a little interference coming in. But yeah, guys just can't do the time. They don't want to do the time. That's just what it comes down to. You know, if you're gonna get involved, just know what you're getting involved in, and take your time like a man. They just can't. And the one thing too is that they always point to everybody else ratted them out first, which is never the case. That's just the excuse that they use. All right, in your opinion, who was the guy or who was responsible for putting the bomb underneath Frank Rosenthal's car? I think history is probably going to, name like a million different fucking people, but who ordered it? Frank Ballesteri. I think hands down that's the guy who ordered it. Who actually planted it? It depends on who you ask. Some have claimed it was Hell's Angels who did it on behalf of Frank Lefty Rosenthal's wife, but I never really bought that. Some say Tony Spilotro did it. I've never really believed that either. What I can say is Ballesteri, whose nickname, tongue-in-cheek here, but his nickname was the Mad Bomber, and he was the Mad Bomber for a reason because of the way he dispatched people. But it's, also worth noting, and I gotta bring this up, that Frank's wife, Jerry, she was an FBI rat. She had met with the FBI a dozen or so times, giving up information on everybody. And so her death has always been mysterious, and I've always thought they gave her a hot dose and killed her real quick. But, that didn't help, Frank Rosenthal. And along with the fact that Frank Ballesteri blamed Frank Rosenthal for all of the problems that were happening in Vegas. And there have been rumors, according to Nick Pileggi, who wrote Wise Guy, which became Goodfellas. He claimed that Lefty Rosenthal was an informant, yet he's never provided any proof of it. The mob began to believe that Rosenthal was an informant because he never got arrested for skimming, but yet everybody else around him did, and he was able to move around and set up shop time and time again. But like I said, until somebody gives me like evidence, it's hard for me to believe that Rosenthal was a snitch. I mean, it's my belief that if Ballesteri... it's my belief, like I said, that Ballesteri reached out to Kansas City and had it all set up, probably through the Savellas. But who exactly put the bomb there? Who knows? As far as Rosenthal being a rat, if that were the case, why didn't he rat out everybody? Why didn't he rat Tony Spilotro out? Because he would have had a reason to. Spilotro was banging his wife, creating problems, smacking him around. So why wouldn't he do that? Why wouldn't he testify? So I kind of have a hard time buying it. I'm not saying it's not true, but a lot of people make that claim, and it can be backed up easily with like 302s and FBI paperwork, but it's never come out. So I'm not really sure, but it was definitely Frank Ballesteri who ordered it. All right, after the Mustache Pete's were whacked by Luciano, did Joe Bonanno really go into hiding? Yeah, he absolutely did, but not to the extent that he did after he tried to whack the entire commission, and that was a whole entire thing, and I've talked about that a million times. But really, the only time he ever went into complete hiding was after the commission thing. He just kind of stood out of the way while the mustache, and obviously this person's referring to Joe Masseria and Salvatore Maranzano. But Joe Bonanno consistently backed the wrong fucking horse every single time. He gets caught attempting to subterfuge the commission, and he pays for that by being chased the fuck out of New York, and that's the truth. But did he hide? Sure. I mean, who wants to get shot? But not to the extent that he did when he tried to kill the commission. All right. Were any of Tommy Bellotti's brothers connected to the Gambinos and what happened to them? I don't know what happened to them. I don't know a ton about Tommy Bellotti other than, he was a good earner and he was a tough guy. His brothers, I don't know if they were in the Mafia or not, to be honest with you. All right. How was Persico able to keep control of the Colombo crime family after spending the majority of his reign in prison? That's a very simple thing. Respect and fear. The guy could still fucking have people killed from prison. He could still order directives from prison. I think anybody that tried to rival him was dispatched pretty quick, or anybody that he thought was making waves, like Bill Cotolo. I mean, that's a great example of it. He thought that Bill Cotolo was making a move, and so, he had him whacked. But I think a lot of that, and I could be wrong, but I think a lot of that had to do with Greg Scarpa not telling the truth, and trying to create a war within a war. And I think that that's probably the most realistic thing to happen there. But he's able to reign from prison because he has power. guys that are fearful of another guy aren't going to make a move, especially when he can push a button and have you whacked without hesitation. All right, I've heard recently that there was a rumor that Russell Buffalino was appointed to run the Genovese crime family for a time after Tommy Ebola. The research I've done says Buffalino was, in fact, appointed the head of the family for a time. He wasn't the boss as far as a definition of a boss goes, but he did provide oversight, I guess. Nope, absolutely right. That is true. He was a guy who oversaw operations until they could put somebody in that had solid footing. Sort of like an overflow manager. He was well respected by all the families, and he just did them a solid till they could get good footing. That's all it is. As far as his relationship with some of those guys, I'm assuming he had good relationships with them, but were him and Benny Squint best friends? Probably not. But he took over in the interim, so to speak. All right, how many mob guys have been robbed or beaten badly? Can you tell me some stories? Yeah, look, there's been guys who've been beat up and shot and left for dead for lived. Probably the most noted was the rat Joe Dogs Iannuzzi. Listen, Tommy Aggro beat the piss out of that guy with pipes. It was so bad that the priest comes in, gives him last rites, and somehow he lives. And he lives to sort of go ahead and testify against Tommy Aggro and puts him away for his life. But Aggro was a fucking maniac. If you've never listened to those wiretaps, go into YouTube and type in Joe Iannuzzi, Iannuzzi, and Tommy Aggro, and listen to them fucking wiretaps. Tommy Aggro was on a whole another. His last name is perfect, Aggro, for like aggravation. Tommy Aggro is a fucking loose nut job, 100%. And is not afraid about telling a guy what he wants to do to him, pop his eyes out of his fucking head. It's like Joe Pesci, but the real version of it. So if you haven't checked out them wiretaps, please do. All right, seeing a lot of biker clubs integrating white people, black people. What's the true initiation? Or is it all by ends today? I'm not sure what that means. I don't know a lot about biker clubs, I'll be honest with you. But what I can tell you is this is traditionally... some of the biker clubs had a no African-American rule. Specifically, the Hells Angels were like that. I think today's a little different. Hells Angels, I think, still sort of go that direction. But like I said, I don't know a lot about the Hells Angels or bikers. But I think the Hells Angels have a sort of mindset that in other biker clubs, let's just make fucking money. I mean, the bottom line is money. So to me, should it matter? No, not at all. If you're a criminal, so be it. Work together, But as far as this initiations, I don't know. I've heard a couple things, but like I said, I'm not educated enough to honestly speak about biker clubs. That's not my sort of expertise. But who you can ask is Chuck Zito. He was a chapter president of the Nomads, Hells Angels in Manhattan for a long time. He's on Instagram. You can ask him. I'm sure he'll answer your question better than I can because I just don't know enough about him. All right, what happens in Chicago if Al Capone never gets sick or goes to prison? Listen, I think he rules for a long time, but I also think, he probably would not have been able to retain power like he did in the old days, especially with new wiretaps and et cetera. And I think probably he would have ended up being put out to pasture. It's a hard question to answer because so much changed between 1930 and 1950. A lot had changed from the perspective of law enforcement investigations, wiretaps, and the feds. And I just don't know if he could have kept up with the changing times. Rackets changed, the mentality changed, viewpoints changed, politics in the mob changed. They got involved with the Kennedys, and it just, there's a lot of different moving parts to that. And I'd like to think that Al Capone was smart enough to change with the times too, but he was so high profile that I just don't know if he could have kept up. And I think you could make the same argument for Carlo Gambino. Can you imagine Carlo Gambino in the mid-'80s with the commission bullshit, the commission trial? First of all, I don't think they ever would have indicted Carlo Gambino in the commission trial. He was a lot smarter than that. And I think he probably would have had a lot of people fucking killed as a result of that too. But, we're never going to know. All right, in his book, Mob Boss, Little Al Diarco mentions he switched to a vegetarian diet on his doctor's advice. Apparently, has saved his life. Do you know any other mob guys who are vegan or who did similar? I don't know. I really don't know. I don't think going off meat is a cure-all. Your body still needs proteins, which is, why most vegans look like goddamn skeletons, in my opinion. But to each his own. Whatever you think is healthy for you, you got to do. Eating a ton of meat is bad for your heart, right? I think we all know that now. But then again, on Tuesday they say 2 glasses of wine is perfect. On Wednesday, 2 glasses of wine will fucking kill you. They don't fucking know. The problem isn't fucking meat. The problem isn't fucking vegetables. The problem is the fucking shit that they put in there that you're unaware of. And I'll give you a good example, and this is probably going to be considered misogynistic, but girls with their fat asses, right? Go back to if you're 45, 50 and down, okay? Because if you're in your 20s, you wouldn't fucking know. But girls' asses did not look like apples back in the day. I mean, you go to old workout videos, for Christ's sakes. Jane Fonda workout, whatever the fuck. And look at that. Asses didn't look that way. And the reason why they are is because of the steroids they put in the fucking chicken, the steroids they put in the beef. And that's a big issue. Because your body wasn't meant to take in steroids and that kind of bullshit. And it changes your body and your makeup. I mean, that explains the fat ass syndrome, right? So, eating a lot of that's not good for you, but you just got to balance it out. Now what, a health doctor? Fuck out of here. But look, we've been eating meat since the days of the fucking cavemen. Why should it change now? It's not a bad thing. It's just everything that you put into you, not a lot of it. Just be consistent with portions and fucking, too much of a good thing is bad for you. All right, veal parm or chicken parm? Veal all day, every day, 7 days a week. All right, this is not a typical mob question, but what would have happened if Pablo Escobar would have succeeded in politics and wound up being the president of Colombia? Well, that's an interesting question. It's a good question. But if you think, listen, if you think the DEA and the CIA didn't bankroll that or weren't behind that, you'd be out of your fucking mind. I mean, think about it for a second. He's a huge fucking narco guy making billions of dollars a year. The DEA don't stop that immediately. Come on, it's hard to believe. As easily as they whacked him on a roof, you mean to tell me they couldn't get into a crowd then? They couldn't get into a crowd to assassinate him at that point? So, look, it's long been associated or asserted that they bankrolled Pablo Escobar, and they worked with Escobar for a long time, supplying weapons and everything else. Nobody is that fucking untouchable. They wanted Escobar to run. They wanted him to win so he could control, Colombia and the politics that were going on there, because at the time the DEA and the CIA had a reason to want to control things there, especially the federal government. Escobar never could have escalated and done some of the things that he did without the help of the DEA and the CIA. You mean to tell me that a narco trafficker could blow up a plane in a fucking building? That's some terrorist type of shit, and he couldn't have done it without help. One, you can't, the explosives you got to get. And there's a lot of things that I think that have been misunderstood about Pablo Escobar. I'm not defending what he did, because he took it to his country's ass to get what he wanted. But he was backed by the DEA and the CIA for a long time, and I think once he outgrew his usefulness, they killed him. So the idea that somehow Pablo Escobar did this all on his own, it's laughable to me. But think about it. Our government has killed people for a lot less, right? So, Escobar whacking hundreds of his own country, and the DEA and the American government doesn't budge an inch. They let that go on for years while they know people are being killed. So I have a hard time buying it, And Escobar on the record had consistently told people that the DEA and the CIA were complicit in some of the things he was doing. And I believe it. I don't think he's lying. I don't think he was lying about that. All right. Who was the guys that had the failed hit on John VC? Who were the guys that were in on the failed hit on John VC, and did they get heat for letting VC walk out of the room? I don't want to get into all that, but but look, if you're within 5 feet of somebody and you can't get the fucking job done, somebody apparently needed fucking glasses, or this guy is the luckiest fucking puke in the fucking world. By the way, he lives outside of Detroit, in case anybody wants his fucking address or wants to know where he's at. Yeah, he's living in Michigan. Haha, John. I mean, dumb. Ron Previte used to brag that he was still bookmaking and extorting people using force. So why was he under the FBI? shouldn't the FBI rat's testimony be voided? Yeah, it should be voided, but the problem is they do this shit while they testify, and then after the fact. Don't forget, these guys, even after they leave WITSEC, are still protected by an FBI handler, and they're still used as informants. Put it this way, there's an informant that is all over social media that is still an active fucking informant with the FBI. I have his paperwork. He's still an active informant of the FBI. And the paperwork states, and this is not verbatim, but I'll give you the crux of it, that he has continued to offer his services to the New York and the tri-state area and Philadelphia, which is funny because you don't know nobody in Philly, but they're still an active informant. The majority of these guys are still active informants. They got to make fucking money. And so, they never stop lying. They never stop trying to get people locked up because that's what they do. As long as they do that, they're going to get protection from the government and their handlers and sort of get carte blanche to do whatever the fuck they want. And Ron Previte was no fucking different. No fucking different. But I have a hard time believing half of that bullshit that he said in that fucking interview where he was sitting in the fucking porn office like he was a fucking porn director getting ready to have a casting couch session with Ralphy Natale. Bring me a hoagie. Oh, Jesus Christ, that fucking slob. But yeah, no, I don't think he was still bookmaking huge. He was probably still making money, but you got to understand, he was bankroll. He made over $1 million for the FBI. He didn't need to bookmake at that point. But it is what it is. These guys are full of shit. All right, if you had to pick one rat that has written a book about their life, who do you think was the most honest in telling their story? I don't think any of them tell the complete truth. But the only guy that I've ever really come across, and this guy hasn't wrote a book at all, is Frank Ganji. He's really the only guy that's said, I'm a rat. Yeah, I didn't want to do prison time, and I was scared shitless of Tommy Patera. I couldn't live with myself for what I did. So at least he's honest about that from on its face. This is a guy who isn't proud of what he's done. He lives with that shit every day. He beats himself up every day for what he did. So if there's anybody who's closer to the truth than anybody else, it's probably Frank Ganji. But then again, informants have a narrative, which is self-driven. But there are certain informants that just, they did what they did and they move on with their life. They don't need the fucking social media bullshit. You don't see Joey Massino with a fucking a YouTube fucking podcast or whatever the fuck it is. You're never going to see him do that. It is what it is. Is Frank a liar? Sure, to some extent. But if I had to say that there was one that told a couple of more truths than the other, it would be Frank. All right. Is Andromeda now more powerful than when... is Andromeda now more powerful than what the Sicilians were under Toto Rina, and does it make sense for American Cosa Nostra to develop business ties with Latin American drug cartels? No, I don't think it makes sense for them to get involved business-wise with them. But look, Toto Rina was one of the most powerful bosses in the history of organized crime, and when he reigned, he was supreme. Forget about it. But now it's a little different, especially with Andromeda moving out further and further into other countries. And listen, as far as cartels, I could argue both ways for that idea. I think there's obviously probably some sort of relationships between cartels and organized crime. Probably not in the United States, probably more so in Europe, but definitely not an American organized crime. And that would typically fall back onto the Sicilians because the drug shipping lanes that were designed by Lucky Luciano and Carmine Galante are still used to this day. If I'm the boss of a family, I don't get involved with any of that cartel shit. Too much heat, too much problem, too much risk for blood. Cartels don't fuck around. And the days of the mob as the main providers of drugs, at least in the United States, are over. That's been over since the 60s. And that really ended with, Catalano, Sal Catalano, Genovese, and Carmine Galante. So... All right, do you think Castro had someone in the mob feeding him intel after he kicked him out of Cuba? It's just that he always seemed one step ahead of anyone that moved on him. I've often wondered that, but I think honestly, the best answer I could provide to you is that I think that there was a subterfuge by some of the United States government who were not supportive of John F. Kennedy, that mainly being Lyndon Johnson, who hated the Kennedys with a fucking rage. I don't think this country's ever seen. And once the Mafia was out in Cuba, the reason why they really backed Kennedy hard was because they wanted Kennedy to go in, get Castro to fuck out so they could get back to their action. But Kennedy failed on every fucking level. He failed to kill Castro. He fucked up the Cuban Missile Crisis. So, I don't think it was the mob as much as it was the CIA and those inside the government who wanted Kennedy out. Now, had Castro, say, been pro-Mafia, then I think they would have worked with him in that fashion, given him a kickback or whatever. But he didn't even want the Italians or any Americans in Cuba, for that matter. He didn't want them there. So I think that the reality is it falls back on the U.S. government more than it would anybody providing intel to Castro. Because if the mob provided intel to Castro, there would have been a lot more serious shit that went on. All right, Jeff, next time you're in Philly, Geno's or Pat's, it's on me. What is it? Which one is your choice? I tend to not eat either one, to be honest with you. I mean, we both know they're tourist traps, right? So I used to swing by, Kitchen Consigliere, Angelo's place in Jersey on the way down, or I'd go over to Chick's or the Saloon. There's a couple of different places I like to go, and I typically stay away from Geno and Pat's. That's just me, All right. Is it better to be feared or respected? I think feared. You can control a guy through fear, and respect comes from fear. I mean, granted, look, guys can respect you just as being a human being. But if they know you won't hesitate if they know that you will not hesitate to bend them like a fucking pretzel, then that sort of brings respect immediately. So, in my opinion, fear is always the key. It always has been. You can be respected as a stand-up guy. And that works with people that you're close to. But you need that to be the case with people who might attempt to step on your toes. And that's where the fear comes in. So for me, it's fear. All right. Scarfo must not have been a bloodthirsty psycho his whole career. He had the respect and the confidence of a guy like the Chin, among others. How much do you think him watching the two previous bosses get whacked out before him contribute to his paranoia? Look, he had his faults. But he was a real gangster. He never ratted on anybody, and by all accounts, Nicky carried himself like a man behind a wall. He might not have been the best boss ever. Look, here's the deal with Nicky. I think some guys are violent by nature, right? They become boss, and they become somewhat of a distortion of themselves. To be fair. Nicky was a killer way before he took over as boss. But if you take a guy like that and you put him in as boss with all that power, I mean, what do you think he's going to do? A guy who's not feared in general has to make them fear. And that's what Nicky tried to do. If they don't fear me, I will make them fear me. So between that and his ego, it was all by design. Did it bother him that other bosses got whacked? Sure, I think maybe to some extent. And I think he knew that it was just as easy for them to kill him as other people got killed prior to him. And I think that's a lot of the reason why he starts killing people, other than just being a fucking nut job. That's why he starts killing people. Was it necessary? Was it a necessity? Probably not after the first 5 or 6 murders, no. But he ends up going overboard. And Nicky was a gangster, but no doubt, hands down. But I just think he was way too bloodthirsty for his own good. And if you look historically at guys who do what he did, they have very, very short, brutal reigns. Longevity is the key, my friend, and that's the truth. That's absolutely the truth. But I think some of the murder and mayhem that he created was to put fear in people. Work on Nicky DeCrow, that prick. All right. Even though I think John Stanfa had something to do with Angelo Bruno's hit, do you think he never got a real chance to show that he could have been a good boss because of the rats, John Vesey, and your favorite gangsters, Ron the Don Previte? In a war with the Young Turks, he never got a legit chance. I think that Stanfa showing up and just sort of trying to assume control, with obviously the Gambino's backing, is what fucked up Philadelphia. This is a guy who he'd been back and forth. I think the guys that are there on a daily basis holding up the fucking framework of the mob are the guys that should have been controlling it. Never mind what Nicky Scarfo did. Stanfa gets an opportunity to take over and he fails. Rats aside, he got the war taken to his ass by people half his fucking age. He tried that Sicilian Don Corleone bullshit, and look what the fuck happened. Listen, Stanford taking over Philadelphia, say in 1950, might have worked. But not in the 90s. Guys were removed from being from Sicily. And what I mean by that is, you're talking second and third generation gangsters now. And they're American bred and born. They're not Sicilian, so they have a different mindset. And he tried to wield power like Carlo Gambino, and he got it shoved right up his ass. And quickly. And it's sort of an American tale of never underestimate your enemy. So yeah, I mean, he got a fair chance as far as I'm concerned, but he couldn't hold up the fucking wall. These guys were too fucking smart, too crafty, and too dangerous. He couldn't compete with that. All right, Agent Pistone mentioned in an interview that he had to shave his mustache off to fit in. Why do mob guys not like facial hair? Is it true or not true? I don't know. I really don't know. I think that's all bullshit. I think that it has, I think to some extent I could see your argument of, clean shaven, they look like businessmen, et cetera, but that was more of an FBI sort of protocol rule than it was anything else. Agents in the FBI usually have to be clean shaven, so I think that's just a lot of made up shit by fucking Joe Pistone, to be honest with you. All right, if communities defund the police, as some protesters are requesting, I could see how our boys seeing an opportunity offering protection for stores, businesses, and etc. What are your thoughts? Listen, we saw how Philadelphia protected its neighborhoods. We saw how they protected the Columbus statue. Look, Philly's a proud city. And the people that live there will go to war for their neighborhood, for their pride. And it's the only city who did this. It's the only city who stood up to the fucking nonsense. And like I said earlier, God bless them. I'm not even from Philly. And I'm proud to see that sort of shit. Guys are going to step in wherever there's a dollar to be made. They're going to find a way around it. I think just recently here in New York, they're getting rid of the plainclothes cops and some of the organized, not organized crime, but there's some of their task force they're getting rid of because of this protest shit. And that, you think that's not going to benefit the mafia? Of course it is. It's like people always tell me, people defend their own and they're not going to stop defending their own. And where there's a dollar to be made, they're going to make it. And I think with the police not getting the money, you're going to lose surveillance type of stuff. That's good for organized crime. All right, who is the most sadistic mafia member of all time? Hands down, I think it's going to be Mad Sam DiStefano, who we have talked about on the show a bunch of times. All right. In many ways, as nuts as Vito Genovese was, did he sort of set his family up for success? Yeah, I think he kind of did. Even though he was a fucking nut and he did things a little backwards, he was still a tough guy. He was still a good boss in the sense of he controlled through fear. He ultimately gets sort of bent over and has to take it with a cactus because of what Gambino and Luciano and Costello do to get even with him. But it would have been interesting if he didn't go to prison for the rest of his life and die of a massive heart attack screaming, "I'll fucking kill all of you pricks." I think it would be interesting to see what would have happened with the Genovese crime family. But yeah, I don't think he was a bad boss. I just think that ego-driven, and that's always going to put guys in jail, having that ego. All right, there was a documentary made for UK TV around 4 to 5 years ago on the Mafia. There was a large segment interviewing Mikey Scars, Ralphy Natale, I can't mention this guy's name, Ron Previte, and Ron Previte didn't give a shit. He sat in his friend's garage, same routine every day. Why wasn't he killed? You can't hit a government informant. It just brings too much heat. These guys are still active informants. They deal with handlers on a weekly basis. There's just no way around it. It's just not an easy thing to do. It really isn't. It just brings way too fucking much heat. And these guys are too high profile. You mean to tell me if somebody blows Ralphy Natale's fucking head off in South Philly, the cops aren't going to be fucking everywhere? You're crazy. You're crazy. All right. I'm from South Philadelphia. We get a bad rap from Crazy Phil and Ralphie for ratting. How do other cities look at Philly for having the first underboss of a sitting crime family ever to rat? Well, technically, they said he was the first boss to ever fucking rat, but he wasn't a boss. But anyway, I don't think you can characterize a city or an entire family over the actions of like 1, 2, and 3 guys. And you have to also look at who were the bosses at the time. In this case, you go from Scarfo to Stampa. Had Nicky not been killing anybody, you might not have guys flip like they did. Every action has an equal reaction, right? So there is some argument. that being a listener is just as good as being a killer. That's what enabled Angelo Bruno to do what he did for so long until he, pinched the quarter till the fucking eagle screamed and the guys had enough of it. But I think in the case of like Nicky Scarfo, had he backed up a little bit on being just little Lord Fauntleroy, if he had just backed off that a little bit, you might not have as many people running and telling on him. But the reputation of Philadelphia outside of Philadelphia is a very interesting one. I've heard a lot of different things. A lot of New York people don't have nothing good to say about Philadelphia guys, and I've been in Philly, and people have said, abrasive things about New Yorkers, and I get it. They're a city that competes. I totally understand it. But I think that some people just don't understand the Philadelphia mentality, and they're never going to understand it. New York is New York. Philadelphia is Philadelphia. Two different places. And listen, talk is cheap. Talk is cheap, and opinions are like assholes. Everybody's fucking got one. But I can't say anybody who thinks for 1 second that those guys down there in Philadelphia are soft or weak or somehow irrelevant is not the case. The point is toughness. Philadelphia exudes toughness. And they get an interesting rep sometimes. And it's always by outsiders who have never stepped in Philadelphia for more than a goddamn cheesesteak and a fucking $12 fucking soda. What the fuck, Philly? Your $12 fucking sodas. Your soda tax is worse than fucking New York. I didn't think that was possible. $9 for a fucking soda. Fuck out of here. I'd rather drink water from the fucking gutter than that fucking $12 soda shit. Pricks. Sorry, that's my rant on soda. But how they say, to get Brooklyn, you got to live in Brooklyn. It's the same thing with Philadelphia. I lived in Philly for a few months, a few years ago, and I've been going there for 25 fucking years now. And I understand the pulse of Philadelphia. I understand the mentality, and there's a lot of things that just people say because they don't know any better. I think that if anybody asks me, I'm closer to a Philadelphia mentality than I ever will be a New York mentality, and that's just the truth. I mean, come on, Philly. I threw pill bottles at Terrell Owens. I don't know if you guys know what I'm talking about. If you're an Eagles fan, you remember when Terrell Owens took fucking pain medication and OD'd, and it was bring your prescription bottle to the fucking, to the link. And everybody was throwing pill bottles at Terrell Owens when he came on the field. I was one of them guys. I'm a huge Eagles fan. And I used to go to like 7 games a year. But listen, you're never going to see a soft person come out of Philadelphia. So the characterization that they take a bad rap for what one or two people do, well, if that's the case, then the fucking Gambinos ought to take a huge knock. The Bonanos ought to take a huge knock. So let them talk. Like my friend says to me all the time, let them talk. They like to hear themselves talk. That's it. Pay no attention. Make your money and just keep it moving. All right. Jeff, if you are anything but a made man and associate, can you just walk away from the life without any repercussions? Well, why not? Why not? Look, I think the reality is how much, it comes down to what do you know? What did you take part in? How much do you know? What were you involved in? Listen, a guy who walks away after taking part in a couple of murders is a huge fucking liability. And so I think it really depends on what you've done inside of that life. In most cases, guys who walk, they give up their businesses, they give up their profits. Nobody's going to bitch because they're going to absorb the racket, and there's more money for everybody else to go around. But I think it comes down to what did you take part in. So let's say, you take a guy that's involved in 12 murders, all of a sudden he wants to walk away. That's going to cause some problems, and it's easier to kill that guy than to even take a risk on that guy talking, right? So, so to let a guy walk away who's got more incentive to talk if he gets caught because he's no longer involved in it, it presents sort of its own problems. But for the most part, guys can walk. Why not? Guy wants to give up a fucking $5 million Shylock in business. Who's going to say no to that? Nope, you can't leave. They're going to say, okay, go ahead. Go fuck yourself. All right, after Bugsy Siegel's death, who held more power in Los Angeles, Mickey Cohen or Jack Dragna? Obviously, Mickey Cohen did. He was the full power there after Benny Siegel gets killed, and he essentially chased Jack Dragna the fuck out of L.A. I mean, not literally, but he pushed Dragna out completely, and I think a lot of that was because Cohen was so brutal, and he wasn't afraid to take it to Dragna's ass. In 1939, it was Meyer Lansky who sends Mickey Cohen to Los Angeles to work directly with Benny Siegel, sort of to kind of keep eyes on him. Cohen helps open the Flamingo. And I don't think it's a stretch to even say that Mickey Cohen reported back to Meyer Lansky about Siegel stealing money. Cohen loves Siegel, but business is business, and I think Cohen was widely responsible. He took over all the bookmaking in the area. For a non-Italian to come in and take over all of the bookmaking, and the guy can't do shit, that tells you something about his toughness. And it's not that Dragna wouldn't try to kill fucking Cohen. He tried like a dozen times and just couldn't get it done. But the real issue between Dragna and Siegel was that Siegel could make money. And he basically comes out there and he takes over a lot of the rackets, and he's bringing in more money for the Mafia than Dragna was. And it created a lot of jealousy and a lot of hostility. And so after Benny Siegel gets killed, Cohen absorbs all those rackets, and then he refuses to sort of let Dragna tell him anything. He basically tells Dragna to go fuck himself. And like I said, Dragna would try to have Cohen killed a dozen times, but Cohen was a lot smarter than Jack Dragna ever was, and he outlived them all. Had Cohen not been able to produce a lot of money, and if he had lost favor with Meyer Lansky and Luciano, they probably would have killed him. But the reality is that he was able to just continue to run rackets. All right. Did you ever play Mafia City Lost Haven? It's my favorite video game since 2002. Story about 1930s Mafia ordinary routine. I've never played that game. The only mob game I ever played was like The Godfather. It was like on PlayStation 2 like years ago. It was a great game. I actually liked how New York City was set in the early days, the 20s, 30s. And they actually got the maps of the streets right, which is fucking crazy to me. But that's the only one I've ever fucked with. All right, I got a question. Okay, we know New York has crews and businesses in New Jersey, but can New Jersey have business interests in New York, and how does that work? It goes all ways. Guys from New York have business in Jersey. Guys from Jersey have business in New York. Territory only matters when a guy is fucking people out of money. That's the only time you're going to see a beef. If you're clear-cut, above board about the money and you're kicking over to here and there, then there's not going to be a problem. But what you're not going to do is just show up and start doing whatever you want, not pay tribute. Guys from Providence have business interests in New York. New York guys have business interests in fucking Providence. Listen, where there's money to be made and everybody can make money, that's where you're going to find them. They work together. All right, what's the most mobbed up city that nobody knows about? Virginia Beach. Straight up, that's the truth. The Gambinos have long had guys there. I don't want to mention any names, but there was a guy down there who controlled a lot of the city's underworld type of stuff, and he used it under the guise of being a land developer. But the fact was he was a very, very tight Gambino guy. They got a lot of Russian mob guys, the Lebanese Mafia, the Italian Mafia, Andrangheta is there. It's not like Cruz. Listen, there's a place in Virginia Beach down at I don't want to say the north end because it's probably wrong, but there's a place called Croatan, and that's where Tommaso Buscetta lived. He lived there. He opened up a bunch of pizza joints in the area. He lived there for a long time. Even Tommy Del Giorno, that fucking piece of shit from Philly, lived in Virginia Beach. So the feds put those guys there for some reason. I don't get it. All right. Can you tell us a little bit about the history behind social clubs and what would happen if a civilian walked in and tried to get a drink? What I can tell you is this. In some cases, civilians are not allowed in. Period. End of fucking story. But listen, if you're known in the neighborhood and you want to drink, most times you can walk in to the front. But you can't go anywhere near the back. There's other things that go on in the back. And it really truly depends on who you know and what's going on inside the club. Most places I've been, people who live like one door over or one flight up, they might come in to get like cigarettes or coffee or something, but that's as far as they're going to go. And nobody's going to make eye contact with them. Nobody's going to talk to them. They come in, they get what they want, and they walk out. There's a reason why there's a members-only sign in the front of the fucking social club. Everybody is scrutinized to enter. So, so often when you go into these places, you get vetted very thoroughly. You can't just walk in. You got to know somebody who knows somebody who gets you in, and then they vet you. They want to know who you are. Nobody's going to talk to you for like a year. And then once they start to kind of get into your business and know who you are, then they start talking a little more openly. And that's been my experience with some places that I do go. I am a member of two different social clubs, and I'm not going to say where or what, where they're at or who they're with or whatever the fuck the case may be. But I ended up going to one, and I made a crack after going there for a couple months with somebody there, and I says, how much money I got to give to be a member? And it was a joke, but it was met with like serious fucking stares. It was an innocent fucking joke, but they don't play around at these places at all. And it just really comes down to you got to show your face. You got to get to know people, and they're going to be very intrusive and they're going to ask you personal questions. It's like being interrogated, but so, while normal people can't really go in there, usually you got to know somebody, and they got to trust you because there is stuff that goes on there. There's discussions that can be had that could be not exactly illegal. And listen, when I go, I fucking go there. I drink my coffee. I shoot the shit with guys. Guys play cards, whatever. It's a lot of different things that go on. But the funny thing about social clubs is the philosophical and political discussions that I hear in these places are hilarious. I get a big crack out of it. All right. Oh, Jesus. All right, have you seen Coffee with Culata on YouTube? What do you think? I thought it was pretty entertaining. It's funny you brought this up, and you're talking about Frank Culata, who is a Chicago mob rat. A friend of mine in Detroit reached out to me about this, and I haven't seen. He keeps threatening to send me a fucking Coffee with Culata mug for Christmas, which I'll fucking throw out my window into the fucking streets if he does that shit, you prick. But listen, I can't subscribe to anything these rats do. And more specific in Frank's case, this guy was not a made member of the mob. He was an associate. A lot of the stories he tells are complete bullshit. Is it entertaining? Sure. I'm sure it is to some extent. But I don't have time for that. He tells people Anthony Spilatro made him in Las Vegas. Since when do captains make guys without a boss being there in Las Vegas? It's bullshit. It's 100% not true. So Frank can live in whatever fucking dimension that he wants. There's nothing wrong with that. But not much of what he says is very true or accurate. I think he has too much oxygen going up his fucking nose. But it's entertainment, and that's all it is. And if you take it for just being entertainment, you don't believe it, you don't take it seriously, then no harm, no foul. I'm with Jeff. Let Gotti rest in peace. There are a number of different avenues we can travel down to answer a lot of questions without pushing Jeff down the Gotti road. Besides, when a man tells you any number of times he doesn't want to talk about it, I respect it. Why keep pushing him? Thank you for saying that, because a lot of people don't fucking listen, and they keep asking, and I'm done with all that. All right, in your opinion, was George Shasha hit because Joey Massino was threatened by him gaining power, or was there reputedly other politics behind him being hit? There were several reasons for this. The most important one was probably the fact that George Shasha stopped conferring with Joey Massino and only dealt directly with Vito Rizzuto. And in turn, Vito Rizzuto stopped dealing with the Bonanos, stopped listening to them, stopped clearing things with them. Keep in mind, it was the Bonanos who bailed Shasha out by bribing the jury on the narcotics charges he was facing. So the Bonanos threw a ton of money to get the fucking the mistrial or the acquittal in that case. And so the Bonanos felt like George Shasha owed them. If they don't do that, he goes away for life. So perhaps they were a little bit insulted. After they did that, he turned somewhat against them. Another reason was, his actions when the Bonanos wanted the Rizzutos to send a crew down to kill Robert Perino. They had an issue. They wanted Robert Perino dead. They wanted George Shasha and Vito Rizzuto to send a hit squad down here. And Rizzuto said no. And I think Massino felt that George Shasha owed them and he should have backed Massino, and he refused to. He backed Rizzuto. And then the sort of the final nail in the fucking coffin was that he told people that Anthony Graziano was a junkie, which was a big problem. Graziano apparently came to a meeting. Maybe he took too much Tylenol. I don't know what the case is, but he started telling everybody that Anthony Graziano was a junkie, and that makes Joey Massino look like an ill-informed boss with no clout, and it infuriated him. One, he didn't like the fact that Anthony Graziano was called a junkie. That's number one. But number two, it made Joey Massino look like he had no control over his own crime family. And that was enough for Massino, and that's exactly why Joey Massino orders his death. Plain and simple. All right. If a mobster who was close enough to be in the know found out his childhood friend was going to be marked for death, would he give his friend a heads up? Does that ever happen? Listen, it's always your friend that kills you, right? And rarely is anybody going to tell you it's going to happen, because as the old adage goes, you let someone know, you're going to go. I know that sounds like if glove don't fit, you must have quit, right? I sound like Johnny fucking Cochran with his bullshit. But no, if you let somebody know, you're going to go. And that's the rule. And it's probably happened before where a guy tipped another guy off. I'm sure it has. But I still think the road ultimately leads to murder at the end of the day, no matter what. So yeah, it's probably happened before. For the most part, though guys aren't going to say shit. The less they know, the better off they are. But it's usually a friend that kills you anyway. So, all right. How long will it take for an underworld figures to move in on the new police-free country? Yeah, I've sort of kind of answered this, but like I said, if there's a dollar to be made, they're going to make it. You'd be a fool not to exploit it for what it is, but it also comes at big risk. So it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. But this garbage is all good for the mob because the law enforcement eyes are on everything else but them. All right. Murder conviction and fleeing back to Italy aside, if Genovese became leader of the commission after Luciano's deportation and had Gambino ordered the hit by himself for Anastasia to be taken out, would Genovese be in support of Gambino taking over as boss, or would Genovese plan to whack Gambino for killing Anastasia? If there's no deal between the two of them, okay, and Carlo Gambino acts on his own to take over the entire mob, Genovese is going to go to war. Hands down, I think that's exactly what Genovese would have done. And ultimately, he makes a mistake trusting Gambino in the end anyway. And we've talked about that before. All right. Why did Big Paulie have Roy DeMeo hit? Could he not see that Gotti and his boys weren't happy? I would have thought that having as much protection as possible around would have been a good idea. DeMeo got whacked because he got Paul Castellano indicted. Not just with murders. But the DeMeo had a horrible oversight with the Westies. He killed people at will without permission. The car stealing theft ring scam that they had going on in Kuwait got Paul Castellano. That's why DeMeo gets killed, is because he got Paul Castellano indicted. That's the bottom line. It had nothing to do with John Gotti whatsoever. It had everything to do with the fact that DeMeo got him indicted. All right, who was the biggest nut job, Anthony Comello or Thomas Uva? Ooh, that's a good one. Anthony Comello, hands down. All right, how much influence did the mob have in propelling the careers of Frankie Valli in the Four Seasons? Probably not as much as, say, like Frank Sinatra. Did they help Frankie Valli? Absolutely. They owned nightclubs and record companies, which would have facilitated Frankie Valli and Sinatra the chance to be more widely seen. In the case of Sinatra, they got him into the majority of clubs in his early days. He couldn't get into any clubs, and the 500 Club in Atlantic City, who was owned by Skinny D'Amato, was the place to be. Not only did that launch Sinatra's career, but it also launched the Martin and Lewis career, Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis. So same sort of thing. The mob would handle contracts disputes just like they did for Sinatra. So yeah, I mean they're responsible for helping them. But if they couldn't sing, the mob would have nothing to do with them because there's no money investment for them. So I'm definitely sure that they helped pave the way for them a little bit. All right, do the Serbians, Pink Panthers, have any connection to the mob? They have got to get rid of all of that jewelry somehow. They're close to the Russian Mafia, the Serbian Mafia, the Italian Mafia, the Ukrainian Mafia. If you're going to be in a jewel theft world, jewel heist guys, you're going to have to know guys in the mob because you're not just going to operate in an area controlled by those groups and not throw in a kickback. You also got to sell the merchandise, right? So if you don't know who these guys are, they're a heist group responsible for over $500 million in thefts. Word is they're responsible for the theft of $80 million in jewels from Harry Winston in Paris back in 2008. So you can look that up. Can we please have a conversation between Ron Previte and Ralphy Natale? You know what? Absolutely, you can. And so what you're about to hear is I'm gonna do as the person asks. He wants to hear a conversation between Ralphy Natale and Ron Previte. So stay tuned.
And now for an all-new segment called
Ron Previte Conversations with Ralphy Natale. Hey everybody, it's your friend Ron Previte, and I wanted to do a word association game with Ralphy Natale. All right, Ralphie, you ready? All right, so I'm going to say a word or a name, and you're going to describe it. Jesus. I spit on him. Donald Trump, he's the president. I got made with him in 1972. Phil Leonetti. I spit on him. John Vesey. I spit on him. Charlie Manson. Gentle young man. Adolf Hitler. I whacked him. The Lindbergh baby. I kidnapped the kidnappers and whacked them. The Roman chariot races, 200 AD. I lost my teeth to a spear commanding Caesar's Mafia. Thanks, Ralphie.
This has been another Ron Previte production. Hey, Jimmy, can you give me a glass of water? His fucking hoagie's stuck in the back of my fucking throat. I don't know which one. I've got like 7.
Jeez.
Shut the fuck up, Ralphie, you fucking windbag. Get some wooden teeth like Georgie Wash.
And welcome back to Mob Talk Radio. We are going to wrap up the questions right here. Is there a connection between the Knights of Columbus and gangsters? I have heard that there are many members who are connected. So here's the thing, right? So yeah, there is a connection. I know a lot of guys, and I know some of my family members were involved in that group, and some were criminals and some weren't. I don't think there's a conspiracy between the Knights of Columbus and criminals. I just think that that's what they joined. But yeah, there's definitely a connection. Is there any Irish mob still active at all? And if so, how big are they? The Westies are still here in Manhattan. It's not what it once was, obviously. The Irish mob is well and alive in Boston as well, but it's not what it once was. Okay, had Huey P. Long not been assassinated and ran for president, do you think the mob would have backed him 100%? 100%, absolutely they would have. Remember, it was Huey Long who allowed Frank Costello to put his vending machines and his Joker poker machines in when Fiorello LaGuardia was tossing all of them into the river. So it was through Huey Long that Costello really gained political power. So yeah, absolutely, they would have backed him 100%, and I think that he would have backed them too. Could Sam Giancana been killed without Tony Accardo's say-so? Yes and no. That's sort of a back and forth there. That decision really wasn't made directly by Chicago, rather outside of Chicago, but they were consulted, obviously, about it. So in a way, yes, and in a way, no. They did have a say, but if there's an overwhelming idea that somebody should go, especially when you look at who Giancana was with the political shit, Sinatra, the Kennedys, that's a much bigger scale than just sort of an internal beef. So if I would think in a situation like that, if New York says this guy's got to go, he's a loose fucking cannon, there's little to nothing that they could say to change that, and they would go with it, obviously. But would they have the final say? I'm not sure in that situation, because it was an overwhelming, huge problem, not just a minor problem. You can't just go in and kill another guy from a crime family. But like I said, Giancana was on a totally different scale, albeit political, Sinatra, the Kennedys, and all that kind of shit. And they were worried about a lot of things with him. So, would they have had to sign off on it? Probably not. Probably not in that case. When is a mafia family considered defunct? When there's no more members, no more crews, no more nothing. So there you go. The Carrazzo brothers, specifically Nicky and Joseph, still acting Boston consigliere for the Gambino crime family, or is that family passed the torch to a new generation? No comment on any of that. Out of all the mobsters you covered on this show, who do you find the most interesting when researching them? It's obscure people. Obscure guys like Joe Adonis, Kenny D'Amato, guys who rarely get the headlines or accolades, but who were knee-deep in the bullshit. I learned more from probably less known figures than I do, say, big fucking names. It's about being low-key more than anything. All right. In your opinion, what family in the United States is the most powerful today? I think it's the Genovese crime family. There will be people that will argue with me and say the Gambino crime family. I still think it's the Genovese crime family. Okay, once your experiences, research, relationships, and overall inside perspective made sense in connecting the dots as to how thoroughly corrupt the FBI, law enforcement, and the illegal, it's funny the way he wrote this, judicial systems are. It obviously didn't deal a death blow to your own integrity to stand up for what and who you courageously continue to empower and rightfully defend. Was your admirable character always this way, or was it a legacy from your family, your father, your mother, or all of these? Well, I appreciate the compliment. I don't know if I'm admirable or not. I'll be honest with you. I see things from a logical viewpoint, right? So guys that are criminals, alleged criminals, it's always been my viewpoint. Prove it in a court of law. The feds have a biased system. They have a weighted system. They have a blank check. I mean, look, for instance, if you win by mistrial, the feds can go at you and at you and at you till you either fold and plead out, or they take everything you own. they bankrupt you. RICO laws, they can take all of your things, your houses, your cars, just for being suspected in a criminal conspiracy. You don't have to be acquitted of that, or you don't have to be convicted of that. They can still take your shit. So the laws are a little lopsided. The system is rigged to a large extent, and juries are finally starting to wake up and see this shit for what it is. I'm not saying everybody's innocent, but far too many people have been indicted and been alleged to have been involved to things to the extent that the FBI makes wild claims. And it's an injustice what happens to a lot of people. I'm just going to be honest with you. All of that being said, I don't know if it's an integrity on my behalf, as it is, so much corrupt journalists who have the feds on fucking speed dial, who are too fucking lazy to just do research and play it both ways. It's always mob murder and mayhem that sells. Rarely do facts sell a newspaper, and I get that. But a good example, in the case of Joey Merlino, the New York Post covered it like shit. They kept bringing up invalid points, which were not facts, but just feelings and emotions based on a perspective and a narrative. Meanwhile, the Daily News actually called it what it was, a fucking joke, because that's what it was. So they did some justification there, but then they covered some things that were just gossipy, fucking soap opera type of bullshit. But if more people just covered it non-biased and did their job, not solely on just acquiring a fucking headline, but rather the facts, then I think it would be more fair and balanced. But facts don't sell papers. They just don't. But, listen, since I was a kid, I've always stuck up for people who didn't have a voice or who just didn't want to have a voice. It's just been my thing. And when it comes to mob guys, alleged mob guys, who defends them publicly? Besides their attorney? Have you ever seen a newspaper come out and say, Joey Merlino, Carmine Galante, well, not Carmine, Tony Salerno, accused of things that he really hasn't done. He's, they're not going to write that narrative. So nobody defends them. Nobody defends them. Someone once told me, and this was a mob guy, he said, Jeff, nobody defends us. Nobody helps us. You're the only one. So if anybody wants to have a beef with you over that, fuck them. He said, a lot of people don't like you, and I don't get it. I don't understand it, because you defend us. You help us. And is he right? Sure. Absolutely, he's right, but it is what it is. I'm not everybody's fucking cup of tea. Sometimes I'm like a gerbil in the bathtub, I guess. I don't know. I don't know why I even said that. Everybody wants to spread bullshit and drama to make, whatever I do invalid, right? So, yet I don't see anybody out there that is saying and railing against me. I don't see them doing it. All they do is cozy up to fucking rats, and they talk about stupid shit that's not even relevant to what I do. Where I went to fucking high school. Who gives a fuck? What does that got to do with anybody? It doesn't invalidate who I am. They think it does because they're fucking morons, but it doesn't invalidate me. What I do is what I do. It's the way I was raised. When you see an injustice, you speak out. I don't think my family, years ago, looking forward to today, would have really suggested I do this. And they don't like it. And they don't like it for a lot of reasons. And some of that is just not for public consumption. I've been on the record. I've been doing this for years. So anybody that's listened to me from day one knows what I'm talking about. I'm not going to regurgitate it here. Some of this is in my DNA, and it's combined with life experience, combined with friendships, good friendships, close friendships. If I can get a guy a fair shake in court, I'm going to do everything within my fucking abilities to do it. And I'm not going to stop. If I can get a guy off a serious charge, I'm going to fucking do it. What's wrong with that? They're not going to pay me for nothing. My friendship. That's it. They don't even have to ask. I do it out of just nature. And it comes with a lot of consequences. It really does. People that think that this is easy, what I do, people that they think I just sit here and just ramble, there's a lot of research that goes into it. The fact that I cover what I cover is not anybody can do this. And it's not me being having a fucking ego about it. This isn't easy. It comes with a lot of fucking consequences. And these jerk-offs that want to spew whatever they want to spew, the minute the FBI shows up their door, they won't be able to talk quick enough. Me, I don't say a fucking word. Go fuck yourself. You got a warrant now? Go fuck yourself. Call my lawyer. That's what I do. That's what I've always done. So, that's why all the haters and bullshitters who spew nonsense are ignorant to the facts. Like I said, if you think it's easy, do it yourself. Everybody claims, oh, let's get them off YouTube. Let's do this, do that. But yet none of them are doing their own thing. Put up or shut the fuck up. That's what it comes down to. They all live in fantasy land. They're all members of Fantasy Island. And it's in my DNA to defend people. And the minute that I stop doing that, you might as well bury me. That's the truth. All right, what direction does the mob go in coming out of the COVID-19? Okay, I've already answered all that like 3 times today. All right, last one. Did Gigante make a mistake by installing Scarfo as boss? That's sort of a repeat of an earlier question. But I think at first, no. I think the ramifications of it, yeah, I think he had some regrets in the end. And I think Nikki, to a small percentage, was good for the Philly mob from the perspective of sort of trying to keep things under control. But we see what happens, and he just fucking takes out the penknife and goes fucking nuts on everybody like Chucky. That's a good comparison, I think. I like that. Chucky Scarfo. So in many ways, yeah, I think so. But it was probably a mistake. But, everything bleeds out in life. You know what I mean? Pardon the pun there, but everything bleeds out. And change comes as a result. You learn from prior people behind you. But history also repeats itself. And that's the truth. And that's the truth. All right, so that's all the questions I'm going to get to today. We are going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to get into scumbags of the fucking week, and I'm going to tell 1 or 2 stories about a friend of mine, and then we're going to call it for the day. So stay tuned on Mob Talk Radio. And welcome back to Mob Talk Radio. We are going to wrap up the questions right here. Is there a connection between the Knights of Columbus and gangsters? I have heard that there are many members who are connected. So here's the thing, right? So yeah, there is a connection. I know a lot of guys, and I know some of my family members were involved in that group, and some were criminals and some weren't. I don't think there's a conspiracy between the Knights of Columbus and criminals. I just think that that's what they joined. But yeah, there's definitely a connection. Is there any Irish mob still active at all? And if so, how big are they? The Westies are still here in Manhattan. It's not what it once was, obviously. The Irish mob is well and alive in Boston as well, but it's not what it once was. Okay, had Huey P. Long not been assassinated and ran for president, do you think the mob would have backed him 100%? 100%, absolutely they would have. Remember, it was Huey Long who allowed Frank Costello to put his vending machines and his Joker poker machines in when Fiorello LaGuardia was tossing all of them into the river. So it was through Huey Long that Costello really gained political power. So yeah, absolutely, they would have backed him 100%, and I think that he would have backed them too. Could Sam Giancana been killed without Tony Accardo's say-so? Yes and no. That's sort of a back and forth there. That decision really wasn't made directly by Chicago, rather outside of Chicago, but they were consulted obviously about it. So in a way, yes, and in a way, no. They did have a say, but if there's an overwhelming idea that somebody should go, especially when you look at who Giancana was with the political shit, Sinatra, the Kennedys, that's a much bigger scale than just sort of an internal beef. So if I would think in a situation like that, if New York says this guy's got to go, he's a loose fucking cannon, there's little to nothing that they could say to change that, and they would go with it, obviously. But would they have the final say? I'm not sure in that situation, because it was an overwhelming, huge problem, not just a minor problem. You can't just go in and kill another guy from a crime family. But like I said, Giancana was on a totally different scale, albeit political, Sinatra, the Kennedys, and all that kind of shit. And they were worried about a lot of things with him. So, would they have had to sign off on it? Probably not. Probably not in that case. When is a mafia family considered defunct? When there's no more members, no more crews, no more nothing. So there you go. The Carrazzo brothers, specifically Nicky and Joseph, still acting Boston consigliere for the Gambino crime family, or is that family passed the torch to a new generation? No comment on any of that. Out of all the mobsters you covered on this show, who do you find the most interesting when researching them? It's obscure people. Obscure guys like Joe Adonis, Kenny D'Amato, guys who rarely get the headlines or accolades, but who were knee-deep in the bullshit. I learned more from probably less-known figures than I do, say, big fucking names. It's about being low-key more than anything. All right. In your opinion, what family in the United States is the most powerful today? I think it's the Genovese crime family. There will be people that will argue with me and say the Gambino crime family. I still think it's the Genovese crime family. Okay, once your experiences, research, relationships, and overall inside perspective made sense in connecting the dots as to how thoroughly corrupt the FBI, law enforcement, and the illegal, it's funny the way he wrote this, judicial systems are. It obviously didn't deal a death blow to your own integrity to stand up for what and who you courageously continue to empower and rightfully defend. Was your admirable character always this way, or was it a legacy from your family, your father, your mother, or all of these? Well, I appreciate the compliment. I don't know if I'm admirable or not. I'll be honest with you. I see things from a logical viewpoint, right? So guys that are criminals, alleged criminals, it's always been my viewpoint. Prove it in a court of law. The feds have a biased system. They have a weighted system. They have a blank check. I mean, look, for instance, if you win by mistrial, the feds can go at you and at you and at you till you either fold and plead out, or they take everything you own. They bankrupt you. RICO laws, they can take all of your things, your houses, your cars, just for being suspected in a criminal conspiracy. You don't have to be acquitted of that, or you don't have to be convicted of that. They can still take your shit. So the laws are a little lopsided. The system is rigged to a large extent, and juries are finally starting to wake up and see this shit for what it is. I'm not saying everybody's innocent, but far too many people have been indicted and been alleged to have been involved to things to the extent that the FBI makes wild claims. And it's an injustice what happens to a lot of people. I'm just going to be honest with you. All of that being said, I don't know if it's an integrity on my behalf, as it is, so much corrupt journalists who have the feds on fucking speed dial, who are too fucking lazy to just do research and play it both ways. It's always mob murder and mayhem that sells. Rarely do facts sell a newspaper, and I get that. But a good example, in the case of Joey Merlino, the New York Post covered it like shit. They kept bringing up invalid points, which were not facts, but just feelings and emotions based on a perspective and a narrative. Meanwhile, the Daily News actually called it what it was, a fucking joke, because that's what it was. So they did some justification there, but then they covered some things that were just gossipy, fucking soap opera type of bullshit. But if more people just covered it non-biased and did their job, not solely on just acquiring a fucking headline, but rather the facts, then I think it would be more fair and balanced. But facts don't sell papers. They just don't. But, listen, since I was a kid, I've always stuck up for people who didn't have a voice or who just didn't want to have a voice. It's just been my thing. And when it comes to mob guys, alleged mob guys, who defends them publicly? Besides their attorney? Have you ever seen a newspaper come out and say, Joey Merlino, Carmine Galante, well, not Carmine, Tony Salerno, accused of things that he really hasn't done. And he's, they're not going to write that narrative. So nobody defends them. Nobody defends them. Someone once told me, and this was a mob guy, he said, Jeff, nobody defends us. Nobody helps us. You're the only one. So if anybody wants to have a beef with you over that, fuck them. He said, a lot of people don't like you, and I don't get it. I don't understand it, because you defend us. You help us. And is he right? Sure. Absolutely he's right, but it is what it is. I'm not everybody's fucking cup of tea. Sometimes I'm like a gerbil in the bathtub, I guess. I don't know. I don't know why I even said that. Everybody wants to spread bullshit and drama to make, whatever I do invalid, right? So yet I don't see anybody out there that is saying and railing against me. I don't see them doing it. All they do is cozy up to fucking rats, and they talk about stupid shit that's not even relevant to what I do. You know, where I went to fucking high school. Who gives a fuck? What does that got to do with anybody? It doesn't invalidate who I am. They think it does because they're fucking morons, but it doesn't invalidate me. What I do is what I do. It's the way I was raised. You know, when you see an injustice, you speak out. I don't think my family, years ago, looking forward to today, would have really suggested I do this. And they don't like it. And they don't like it for a lot of reasons. And some of that is just not for public consumption. I've been on the record. I've been doing this for years. So anybody that's listened to me from day one knows what I'm talking about. I'm not going to regurgitate it here. Some of this is in my DNA, and it's combined with life experience, combined with friendships, good friendships, close friendships. If I can get a guy a fair shake in court, I'm going to do everything within my fucking abilities to do it. And I'm not going to stop. If I can get a guy off a serious charge, I'm going to fucking do it. What's wrong with that? They're not going to pay me for nothing. My friendship. That's it. They don't even have to ask. I do it out of just nature. And it comes with a lot of consequences. It really does. People that think that this is easy, what I do, people that they think I just sit here and just ramble, there's a lot of research that goes into it. The fact that I cover what I cover is not anybody can do this. And it's not me being having a fucking ego about it. This isn't easy. It comes with a lot of fucking consequences. And these jerk-offs that want to spew whatever they want to spew, the minute the FBI shows up their door, they won't be able to talk quick enough. Me, I don't say a fucking word. Go fuck yourself. You got a warrant now? Go fuck yourself. Call my lawyer. That's what I do. That's what I've always done. So that's why all the haters and bullshitters who spew nonsense are ignorant to the facts. Like I said, if you think it's easy, do it yourself. Everybody claims, let's get them off YouTube. Let's do this, do that, but yet none of them are doing their own thing. Put up or shut the fuck up. That's what it comes down to. They all live in fantasy land. They're all members of Fantasy Island. And it's in my DNA to defend people. And the minute that I stop doing that, you might as well bury me. That's the truth. All right, what direction does the mob go in coming out of the COVID-19? Okay, I've already answered all that like 3 times today. All right, last one. Did Gigante make a mistake by installing Scarfo as boss? That's sort of a repeat of an earlier question. But I think at first, no. I think the ramifications of it, yeah, I think he had some regrets in the end. And I think Nikki, to a small percentage, was good for the Philly mob from the perspective of sort of trying to keep things under control. But we see what happens, and he just fucking takes out the penknife and goes fucking nuts on everybody like Chucky. That's a good comparison, I think. I like that. Chucky Scarfo. So in many ways, yeah, I think so. But it was probably a mistake. But, everything bleeds out in life. You know what I mean? Pardon the pun there, but everything bleeds out. And change comes as a result. You learn from prior people behind you. But history also repeats itself. And that's the truth. And that's the truth. All right, so that's all the questions I'm going to get to today. We are going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to get into scumbags of the fucking week, and I'm going to tell 1 or 2 stories about a friend of mine, and then we're going to call it for the day. So stay tuned on Mob Talk Radio.
And now it's time for a new segment on Mob Talk Radio called Scumbag of the Week.
All right, so this version's of Scumbag of the Week really is Scumbags of the Week. And before I get to that, I'm going to make a slight change to the show here. Rather than tell a couple of different stories about my friend Pete, I'm only going to tell one. But let's get to Scumbag of the Week. Scumbags of the Week this week are keyboard warriors, and there's a reason for it. First of all, they're nothing but shit talkers, liars. But my issue is that they never use their real name. They hide behind fake accounts, and they jump into these fucking Facebook Facebook groups and they talk all this crazy nonsense and shit, and they don't back up anything with logic or fact. It's always some minuscule fact, and then they warp the facts so bad that any ounce of the truth that comes with it becomes bullshit. And I just think if you're going to be man enough to talk all that shit, you should be 100% fucking man enough to use your own goddamn name. And they don't. There's some that do. I give them, listen, the ones that got something to say, I got no problem with that. We can talk shit all day. But if you're going to hide behind a fucking fake name, you're nothing but a fraud and a fucking bitch. And that's the truth. Own what you say. I don't hide my name. I come on my show every week. I do what I do. I get hate mail like everybody else does, and I address it. But when you hide behind a fucking moniker and a fucking fake profile and a fake fucking name, which they accuse me of doing, which is the stupidest fucking thing I've ever heard. I have one fucking Facebook account. That's it. One. Nobody addresses me. They talk about me, not to me. So if you're one of these jerk-offs that still lives with your mommy in a basement and you're going to talk all that shit, and I know who all of them are. I mean, it's no secret. There's easy ways to find out. But if you're going to sit there in a fucking group, and it's not just Facebook, it's all over the place, and you're going to use a fake name, be a fucking man. Why are you being a coward? I know why you're being a coward. Maybe you should fucking come out publicly and say why you're a fucking coward. You're afraid to use your own fucking name because you know I'm going to go at you, and you don't want to deal with that. You don't want the fucking pressure of people dogging you for lying. That's why you're not relevant. You want to be relevant, use your fucking name. Don't hide behind a fake fucking name. It's so stupid, the whole fucking thing. And all you people do is live. You live and breathe nonsense, bullshit, and bullying. And you wouldn't say it to me. None of you will. None of you will. You'll say it from fucking 500 miles away. You ain't going to say it to me. Believe me, you're not going to say it to me. And so for those that do have something negative to fucking say and use their real name, I give you props. I give you respect. You're entitled to your opinion. I got no problem with an opinion. But when you lie nonstop, because that's what you do, you lie, and you back up all the rats, then your character speaks for itself. Own that shit. If I'm using my name and I'm owning that shit on a fucking weekly basis for 5 fucking years, and you can't do it for 5 minutes, you're a pussy. That's the truth. And I shouldn't even address this bullshit. I really shouldn't, because it's so stupid. I get a lot of laughter from it. It's hilarious. It really is hilarious. You know, but at the end of the day, if you're not going to be an adult and you're not going to be man enough to, like, use your real name, Washington fucking State, think I don't know where you fucking live? I know exactly where you fucking live. So don't play the games. Don't hide behind nonsense. Just be who you are. You don't like me? I don't give a fuck. I really don't give a fuck. Your opinions and your lies do not affect me in the slightest. That's why I don't pay attention to it. I'm a success. You're a fucking failure. You have been your whole life. And that's the way it's going to be because you focus on everybody else's success but your own. That's sad. So keep living in the basement. Keep doing what you're doing. Get yourself a little kick. I'm sure it makes you feel a certain kind of way to talk about other people because you ain't got nothing worth of fucking your life to talk about. But do yourself the self-respectful thing. Use your fucking real name. But you won't. And you won't say it to me. You won't say it to me. And for any of those people, and you know what, I'm going to leave it. I was going to say something, I'm going to leave it at that. Because it's not worth my fucking time. It's not worth my time. I'm successful, you're fucking nothing. And that's the way it's always going to be. If you put half an ounce of fucking interest or half an ounce of the energy that you put into making up rumors and lies about me, if you put that into your own life, you'd be successful, but you're always going to be a bitch and a coward and a failure because of it. You live off other people, and you want to make everybody fucking miserable because you're a fucking miserable sack of shit. And that's the truth. And that's all I'm going to say about it. Just use your real name. Use your real name. You won't, because you know what I'm going to do. I'm going to call you out. I'm going to call you personally, and we're going to have a discussion about it, since you want to have a big fucking mouth. But you're not going to do that, because you want to take snipe shots from the fucking woods so nobody can see who you are, because you know you're lying. That's the biggest thing. You know you're fucking lying, and you don't want to get caught being the fucking culprit, because you know what's going to happen to you when you do get caught, and nobody wants that pressure. So it's easy to fucking fire off rounds from 100 feet away. It's different to stand in front of me and do it. I'll tell you that goddamn much. All right, so the last thing that we are going to cover here, I'm going to tell a really quick story about my buddy Pete. So this story has to do, and if you're unfamiliar with who Pete is, go to my last show and listen. At the time that this particular incident happened, it's the time Pete's almost got me clipped. Not really, but at the time I had left. I was working for a big company, a multi-million-dollar automotive company, and I had transferred to a different company. I left one company, went to another. And the way that we kind of had it set up was, Pete owned a lot of pizza places around the area, and sort of the deal that we worked out. Like Pete was opening up a bunch of different places, training people how to run the business, and then he was like leaving them to it and taking a kickback from the profits. And one of the deals we had set up with a couple of them was if these guys who own these places would deliver pizza, we'd do free work on their car. Not a lot, just something equal lesser value. This way guys didn't have to spend money for lunch and whatever. And so we had a pretty good thing going on. Guy would come in, he'd pull his navigator in, he'd have 5, 6, 7 pizzas. We had like 10 employees. We'd unload the pizza, and then he'd get work done to his car for free. And so we would have lunch, and it was working that way for a long time. But then something happened, and it caused a problem for me because I'm the one that knew the guys. And so it's going to lead into a rabbit trail of something else, but I'm going to make my point clear. So what ended up happening was, apparently on one of my days off, the general manager of this place called in a favor from this guy who we're going to call Mo, for example. And he was directly involved with business with Pete and some other things. And basically, he would come in, drop off pizzas, like I said earlier, but it really wasn't Mo. Mo was attached to another guy, and I don't want to say the other guy's name, but this other guy had just opened a pizza place. And I guess that they worked out I guess they ordered lunch from the place, not realizing Pete was like sort of the shadow fucking owner of this joint. And they basically worked out a deal with him. Oh, you come in, you give us pizza, we'll work on your car, et cetera, et cetera. Well, they did this behind my back. I didn't know they did that. Had I known it, I wouldn't have allowed it, because this guy was just opening up this place. You can't do that to people. And basically what they did was this. Somehow they managed to order like a ton of food and did it on credit. And first of all, Pete's not the kind of guy that ever did credit. And this guy, this other guy that he was sort of training the business to and everything, was sort of trying to take off on his own. And so the guy guy had cash flow, but not like that. And so what ended up happening was they ordered all this food with a promise to pay him later on that day, and they never did. And so a couple of days go by, and I keep getting calls from Pete on the phone, and he's pretty patient with everything. Hey, how you doing? You need to call me. I got to talk to you about something. And I was busy, and I didn't return his call, which was a huge fucking mistake. Because then one day he shows up at my work, says, come on, take a ride, we got to talk. We get in a car, he's like, yeah, how come you haven't called me? I've been busy doing this and that and the third. And I look at his face, and his face is totally different. It looks like a fucking demon. And I could tell he's holding his anger back. I said, what's the problem? He says, this fucking guy at your place fucking ordered like $200 worth of food and never showed up to pay the fucking bill. And I was like, what's that got to do with me? And he looked at me, and I shit you not, said, this is your fucking fault. And he put his finger right in my face. This is on you. And it was an important lesson, which I'm going to get to. I said, so what could I do? I said, Pete, I'm between bills, I'm between checks, I don't have cash flow. This was fucking over probably 15, 16, 17 years ago. And he says, you got to make it right. You're going to go in and you're going to apologize to the guy. And I'm going with you. And I'm like, yeah, but the bill. And he says, I'll take care of the fucking bill. You just never let this happen. So he goes in there, and I had to fucking grovel to this other guy and apologize for what people did. And then I fucking, like 2 weeks later, went in and paid the bill. And that was a situation that got me in a lot of trouble. It's not because I did anything wrong, but because these people were representatives of me. They were coworkers, friends, whatever the fuck the case may be. Their actions made me look a fool. And that's what the moral of this story is that the people you fucking surround yourself with are supposed to represent your interests in the best of who you are. So if you hang out with flunkies and they give you a bad reputation, you should have to pay for that. Was it my responsibility? Absolutely. Because if it wasn't for me, they wouldn't have been able to do that, and they took advantage of me. They took advantage of my friendship, and it almost got me in a lot of fucking trouble. Yeah, over $200. It was the principle, which leads me to this next kind of thing, which I'm not going to get totally into, but I'm just going to explain it. And it's a situation where when you say things, when you hang out with me, and I just example purposes only, and I introduce you to A, guy B, guy C, they're not being nice to you because they like you. They're not being nice to you for any other reason but because they like me. Because they have respect for me and I have respect for them. And the minute that you breach is a better word. The minute you breach that with them, it becomes my responsibility. Because I brought you around. I made an introduction. So if somebody goes bad, it's my fault. I get held responsible for that. Now, on one hand, yes, it's my responsibility. But on the other, if you're stupid enough to do dumb shit, then that falls on you. I can only uphold my point of view, which is, okay, I brought the guy around, so this heat is because of me. I apologize. I'll do whatever you want me to do. And that's the reality of it. The lesson is the people that you introduce to people, you better make for damn sure who they are. And people make mistakes and they do stuff out of stupidity, anger, rage, jealousy, and I get all of that. But at the same time, you can't step over the line and then try to take it back and expect people to be nice about it. You can't take it over the line and expect to get a pass because you know me. Because the minute that you walk over that fucking line, you're on your own. And that's just the truth. And that's in all kinds of forms of life. It's not just the streets. It's not just this. It's business. It's everything. The minute that you're willing to step over the line and say dumb shit, you got to be an adult to cover it on your own. Because that's your character, not mine. You know, your character might be clean with me, but if it's not clean with my friends, then I got no use for you. And that's the truth. And people are justified in being angry about shit like that. There's a protocol, there's a respect, and there's a line you don't cross. And my loyalty is spoken for, so to speak. When I say that, what I mean is I'm going to be loyal to my friends. You disrespect them, you're disrespecting me. You fuck them, you're fucking me. And that's just how I see things. And I think if too many people live with this fucking follow mentality, they follow everybody else around. Fuck that, be a leader. Be a leader. Don't let people take advantage of other fucking people, but by all means accept responsibility because you make a fucking introduction. But what happens after the fact ain't your fucking problem. And that's the truth. That's the absolute truth. And I stand by the people I'm loyal to a fault. To a fault. I will accept responsibility for it. But once it reaches a certain level and you don't want to listen, you're on your own. And that I know a lot of people like that. And I think if more people live that way and you know, accept responsibility for their own bullshit and don't try to like back out or weasel out of it by saying other shit or, well, it's not this, you misunderstood this. Your words put you in that situation. And so the point is that just respect everybody. You know, you do that, you won't have a problem. You know, and it comes right back to the Pete thing. You know, if these guys had respect for me, they would have respected my friendship with that guy and they wouldn't have done what they did and they wouldn't have put me in that jam. But I put myself in that jam because I made it look easy. They borrowed on my reputation. And thank God, you know, it wasn't that big of a deal at the end of the day. But it was a lesson that I learned, is that you have to be culpable and responsible for what people you bring around do. It's like going to a party. You take your friend to a party who you know gets fucking drunk and breaks shit. What the fuck are you going to take him for? What do you expect is going to happen? You know? And you can forgive people, but then there's a certain limit to that. You know? So, all right. So all that being said, we're going to be back. I'm thinking maybe next week. I'm not sure. I'm going to decide probably this weekend what we're going to do. If anything, I'm only going to do a short Q&A next week because I'm going on vacation. In the meantime, if your city has been green lit, go out and enjoy the fucking weather, go out and enjoy a beer, go out and enjoy just being able to be the fuck outside and not stuck indoors like a fucking cockroach on the wall, betting on whose shit streaks the longest. All right, all that being said, send your threats, your hate mail, and everything else to me. And, like I said, if you got something nasty to say to me, just address me. Don't be a coward. Don't hide. You know what I mean? So all that being said, everybody stay safe, and hopefully we'll see you next week. If not, we'll be back in 2 weeks, but I'll let everybody know probably midweek.